Chapter 54. Humph. Yi Xian sneered. Although I don't know what your goal is, we're just making use of each other. Don't make yourself sound so righteous. After the last layer of window paper was torn apart by Yi Xian, the elemental spirit completely calmed down. A complicated expression appeared on its face as it looked at Yi Xian. What do you want to know? Yuan Ling asked in a low voice. Who is Yuan Mo? What is this blood sea battlefield? Who are those blood souls that escaped? Why did you choose me? A series of questions came out of Yi Xian's mouth. He looked straight at Yuan Ling, trying to see something in his eyes. Come with me. Yuan Ling was silent for a while. He did not look at Yi Xian but walked towards the deepest part of the blood sea. At the end of the blood sea, a bronze stone door seemed to have stood there since ancient times. There were flowers, birds, fish, insects, stars, and the universe. There were also many strange patterns carved on the bronze stone door, giving people a feeling of great vicissitudes. Yuan Mo was my previous master. This blood sea battlefield is actually called the ancient battlefield. It was where Yuan Mo and the Immortals fought 10,000 years ago. And those blood souls that escaped to the human world are the remnant souls of the Immortals after they died. After Yuan Ling finished speaking, she suddenly turned around to look at Yi Xian and continued, as for the fact that you were able to come here and cultivate the immortal scripture, it was also a coincidence. Yuan Mo answered Yi Xian's questions one by one, but Yi Xian could feel that Yuan Mo must have a great secret that he did not reveal to him. Is Yuan Mo still alive? Yi Xian asked in a low voice. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Yuan Ling shook his head and smiled bitterly. Even though the immortal scripture is an ancient demonic art, Yuan Mo's soul has long been destroyed in that ancient war. Yi Xian, you should know that as the weapon spirit of the immortal scripture, I have been guarding this place for 10,000 years. I have been waiting for a person who can inherit the immortal scripture to appear, and you are the person I have chosen. Yuan Ling said with certainty. This door leads to the earthly immortal dimension, and it has been sealed for 10,000 years. If you want to advance in your cultivation, then you can only push open this door and head to the boundlessly vast earthly immortal dimension. This is my mission of guarding this place. Yuan Ling's voice became extremely solemn. Although these blood souls were immortals when they were alive, their power has long ceased to exist. This time, they have escaped to the human world and will definitely cause chaos. When they rebuild their bodies and recover their cultivation, they will definitely open this door and return to the earth immortal world. At that time, the fact that you cultivate the immortal scripture will also be exposed to the earth immortal world. Yuan Ling continued to explain the importance of this, but Yi Xian did not speak for a long time. I want to return to the human world. Aren't you coming with me? Yi Xian asked in a low voice before leaving. My mission is to guard this place. If I leave with you, no one will be able to seal this broken spatial barrier. At that time, this ancient battlefield will be exposed to the human world. Yuan Ling said in a low voice. Yi Xian took a deep look at Yuan Ling, and an obscure murderous intent quietly disappeared. He did not say anything and turned to go back the way he came. Looking at Yi Xian's back, Yuan Ling's aura became deathly still. When Yi Xian disappeared from the blood sea battlefield, Tong Tian black gas suddenly erupted from his body, as if suppressing something. Buzz! All of a sudden, the void buzzed and ripples spread out. A blood-colored phantom quietly appeared beside the origin spirit, and a dark and obscure aura slowly bloomed from this phantom. He has begun to suspect, the blood-red shadow said in a heavy voice. Yuan Ling slowly shook his head and said, so what if he suspects? Sooner or later, he will push open this door. After spending 4 years together, I understand him very well. Although he cares about the so-called family ties in the mortal world, compared to the great path to heaven, they are nothing more than fleeting clouds. Today, you have exposed your true body, and your aura has already leaked. Moreover, if these remnant souls escape to the human world, I am afraid it will attract the attention of the Earth Immortal realm. The blood-red shadow reminded. Ha! Yuan Ling laughed coldly and said, everything is going according to our plan. If we don't release these remnant souls into the human world, how can we quickly force him to open this door? You are too arrogant. You are not the Immortal Scripture's device spirit, and his heaven-destroying halberd has already recognized him as its master. Moreover, he has cultivated this forbidden technique to a very high level. If there is any mistake, I am afraid you and I will end up very miserable. The blood-red shadow growled. Humph, you are too careful. He has only cultivated for 4 years and is not even an immortal. Everything is under our control. Yuan Ling said with certainty. Not in the material world, not in the void. Yi Xian's current state was very strange. It was as if he did not exist in the world at all, and the conversation between Yuan Ling and the blood-red shadow was all heard by him. Interesting. Yi Xian sneered and whispered. Looking at the Tongtian devil qi that was blooming around Yuan Ling and this unfamiliar blood-red shadow, Yi Xian did not know what Yuan Ling's real intention was, but the scene now had already made some guesses in his heart. What the Yuan Ling didn't know was that Yi Xian had long since mastered all of the cultivation techniques in the Immortal Scripture. Other than the fact that his cultivation level hadn't increased, the various forbidden secret techniques in the Immortal Scripture could be said to be at his fingertips. Yi Xian had always believed in one sentence, the people who can hurt you will always be the people close to you. Although this sentence was a bit extreme, at this moment, it was very good proof. In fact, when Yi Xian cultivated the Immortal Scripture to a high level, he had already discovered that Yuan Ling was not the artifact spirit of the Immortal Scripture at all, but an existence in the state of a remnant soul. This matter had always been in Yi Xian's heart, and he had never revealed to Yuan Ling how far he had cultivated the Immortal Scripture. Interesting, very interesting. Let me see who will win in this game. Yi Xian smiled cruelly. His body suddenly became illusory, and he truly disappeared from the bloody battlefield. Yi Xian's heart was very big, to the point that it was unimaginable. He wanted the world to be destroyed, but he would not be destroyed, and all living things would die, but he would not die. He wanted to truly ascend to the 9 heavens and look down on all living things. Yi Xian did not open this door. Although he was worried about his family in the mortal world, the main reason was his doubts about Yuan Ling. From the moment Yi Xian stepped into the bloody battlefield, Yuan Ling instilled in him the idea that if he wanted to pursue the Tongtian Dao, he had to open this door and enter the Earth Immortal realm. Only then could he truly transcend the mortal world and become an immortal with the same lifespan as the heavens. Yi Xian only knew what was behind this door from Yuan Ling. Moreover, Yi Xian had always believed in one thing. In the face of unknown danger, he would be cautious. Only when he completely grasped the initiative, would he attack like thunder, and would not show any mercy. During these 4 years, Yi Xian had struggled between life and death, and fought in the bloody sea. He had grown from an inexperienced youth to an immortal heavenly lord. He especially cherished this hard-won opportunity. Yi Xian had once sworn to the heavens that his future would not be controlled by anyone. If anyone wanted to control his fate, the only outcome was death. No one was an exception. Chapter 55. Jiangnan City, Biyun Pavilion. Yi Xian was sitting on a soft sofa, watching a rerun of the program on TV. There was no sadness or joy on his face, so no one could tell what he was thinking. However, the occasional frown proved that Yi Xian's heart was not calm. On the TV screen, an extremely rare meteor shower streaked across the sky from east to west. The blood-red meteor was extremely dazzling, causing the host to shout excitedly. He kept making up stories, saying that the meteor shower that appeared this time was a spectacle that was hard to come by in 1,000 years. Yi Xian turned off the TV and narrowed his eyes. He had watched this rerun of the program 3 times in a row. Others did not know what this meteor shower was, but Yi Xian was sure that this meteor shower was the blood souls and strange beasts that had escaped from the Blood Sea battlefield. The scene broadcast on TV was only the tip of the iceberg. He was afraid that these strange beasts and blood souls had already been lurking in the dark all over the world. The world is going to change. Yi Xian whispered. According to Yi Xian's original idea, these blood souls and strange beasts would definitely bring earth-shaking changes to the world when they appeared in the mortal world. For the peace of his family, these blood souls and strange beasts naturally had to be exterminated. However, when Yi Xian learned of Yuan Ling's conspiracy, this idea disappeared. According to Yi Xian's guess, he had already become a thorn in the side of these blood souls because he cultivated the immortal scripture. When they devoured enough flesh and blood essence, they would definitely come to find trouble with him. As the cultivation of these blood souls gradually recovered, they would naturally give him great pressure. This was also what Yuan Ling wanted to see. He wanted to force him to open the door and take the crucial step to become a legendary immortal. Immortal. What a tempting word. Even Yi Xian had an irresistible reason when faced with this word. However, Yi Xian was not stupid. How could Yuan Ling's plan be just to make him an immortal? He was afraid that when he opened the door, something terrible would definitely happen. Before he knew what Yuan Ling's real purpose was, Yi Xian would never step into his trap. Immortal cultivation was about cultivating one's fate and going against the heavens. One wrong step and the whole game would be lost. The consequence of losing was naturally the destruction of the spirit and the death of the body and the Tao. Yi Xian wouldn't arrogantly think that he was the main character of the world, that he had some sort of domineering aura, that all calamities wouldn't befall him, and that all living things would bow down to him. If he really thought so, it would be impossible for him to have his current cultivation. Yi Xian was lost in contemplation and was constantly planning his future. First, the appearance of the blood soul beasts in the mortal world would definitely cause chaos. However, the life and death of the people had nothing to do with him. He only needed to ensure the safety of his family. That was enough. Second, Yi Xian clearly remembered that a few of the blood souls were extremely powerful. If Yi Xian wanted to find them, he could only find out what had happened in the ancient battlefield from them. A series of steps took shape in Yi Xian's mind. A cruel smile appeared on the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. When he looked in the direction of Heartbreak Mountain, a cold and brutal killing intent quietly flashed across his eyes. Unknowingly, Yi Ling came to Yi Xian's side and shook Yi Xian's arm coquettishly. "Brother, it's the new year the day after tomorrow. Aren't you going to take your good sister to buy some New Year goods today?" Yi Xian's thoughts turned. He smiled and said, "Let's go now. Today, I'll give you a present too. Brother, you're the best." Yi Ling's eyes lit up. She pulled Yi Xian's arm and walked out of the house. It took Yi Xian a month to return home from the Blood Sea battlefield. There were only 3 days left until the new year. Yi Xian temporarily put aside the matter of the blood soul beasts and spent the new year with his family. That was what he needed to do now. 4S shop. All kinds of luxurious cars were parked here. Yi Ling's little face was filled with excitement. She kept looking around like a cheerful elf. "Mr. Yi, this Maserati is not only very safe, but the body is also very beautiful. The interior decoration is also top-notch. It suits Miss Ye's identity the best. You can consider it," a saleswoman said with a smile. "Buy a car." Yi Xian and his sister appeared in this 4S shop to buy a car. Although Yi Ling was only 16 years old and did not know how to drive, this did not prevent Yi Xian from giving this Maserati to his little sister as a New Year gift. I'll take this one." Yi Xian nodded. "Brother, you really want to buy it? But I don't even have a driver's license." Yi Ling was slightly embarrassed, but her eyes were filled with happiness. If you don't know how to drive, you can slowly learn. With a car, it will be much more convenient for you to go to school in the future. As Yi Xian spoke, he directly took out a gold card and handed it to the saleswoman in front of him. This also made the saleswoman's face bloom with a smile. She kept thanking Yi Xian and even took the gold card from Yi Xian to complete the transaction procedures. The scene of the siblings buying a car naturally attracted the attention of many customers. They all sighed. They did not know which family's young master and young miss came out to play, but they bought a car that cost millions just like that. The saleswoman left quickly and returned quickly with a car purchase agreement in her hand. She respectfully handed the gold card back to Yi Xian and said, "The license plate and all the procedures have been completed. Mr. Yi Xian, you only need to sign and our shop staff will send the car to your home." The saleswoman's service attitude made Yi Xian very satisfied. He directly nodded and was about to sign the car purchase agreement, but it was also at this moment that a cold and threatening female voice suddenly rang out. "Wait, I want this car." A young man and woman came to Yi Xian's side at some point in time, their bodies exuding the aura of a superior. The woman's skin was as white as snow, her eyebrows were picturesque, and her hair was like a cloud. She gave off a cold and noble beauty, but her clothes were different from ordinary people. Her clothes were made of cicada silk, somewhat similar to the women's gowns of ancient times. "I'm sorry, madam. This gentleman has already paid. You can look at other cars." The saleswoman's eyes were sharp. She could tell that the woman in front of her was not ordinary, so she hurriedly bowed and apologized. Leng Qingxue frowned slightly. As an ancient warrior and a master, she had just arrived in Jiangnan with her junior brother, so she naturally needed to find a means of transportation. The Maserati in front of her happened to be to her liking, but she did not expect that someone had already bought it. Leng Qingxue looked directly at Yi Xian and took out a gold card, giving off a strong feeling. "I'll give you double the price. Give this car to me." Looking at the woman in front of him, Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not expect to meet an ancient martial arts master in a small 4S shop. "I'm not selling." Although the other party was an ancient martial arts master, in Yi Xian's eyes, she was no different from an ant. How could he give the gift he gave to his sister to someone else? Chapter 56. Yi Xian directly signed the car purchase agreement. He didn't even bother to look at Leng Qingxue. Yi Xian's attitude caused Leng Qingxue to be stunned on the spot. A trace of embarrassment and anger flashed across her face. "Senior sister, forget it, we'll just change to another car." Looking at the anger on Leng Qingxue's face, the young man was afraid that Leng Qingxue would make a move on Yi Xian and cause unnecessary trouble, so he quickly advised her. "Humph. A mere mortal who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth." Leng Qingxue said contemptuously and turned to leave. It was obvious that she would lose her status if she were to make a move on a mortal. "Kid, you've offended someone you shouldn't have offended. Next time when you go out, remember that this world is very big. Even if you're rich, there are some people you can't afford to offend." The young man sneered and followed Leng Qingxue. Such a scene directly made Yi Linger's face turn red with anger. She kept waving her little fists and said in dissatisfaction, "What are you so arrogant for? If it wasn't for my brother not hitting women, I would have taught you a lesson today." As Yi Linger's words fell, Leng Qingxue stopped in her tracks and slowly turned around. With a look of contempt on her face, she said, "Little girl, you should be glad that you were born in this era of peace. If it was during a war, just because of your words, you would have lost your life. All right, Linger, let's go." Yi Xian's expression was calm. He did not show any anger as he pulled Yi Linger out of the 4S shop. On the street, Yi Linger was indignant and said, "Brother, why didn't you teach this stinking woman a lesson just now?" Looking at Yi Linger's angry little face, Yi Xian chuckled and said, You still can't change this little delinquent's habit. There are too many self-righteous people in this world. If you don't like everyone, do you have to personally teach them a lesson? In fact, in Yi Xian's eyes, although Ling Qingxue was an ancient martial arts grandmaster and a rare beauty, how could he teach her a lesson just because of a few words? The principle that Yi Xian believed in was that he would never take the words of an ant to heart. However, if he really wanted to make a move, even if you were a beautiful and peerless fairy, you could only turn into a cold corpse in Yi Xian's hands. Alright, mother should still be at work. Let's buy some gifts and visit her, then go home together, Yi Xian said with a smile. Shopping, a large amount of shopping. The Jinhua Luxury Plaza was visited by the brother and sister. When the brother and sister walked out again, they had a large number of goods in their hands. In the festive atmosphere of the new year, Yi Ling had long forgotten about the previous unhappiness. The brother and sister went straight to the hotel where Yi Mu was. Bohai Hotel. It was one of the 5-star hotels in Jiangnan City. Yi Mu was working here, doing the cleaning work in the hotel. Although Yi Xian had told his mother early to let her rest at home and that she didn't need to do this job anymore, Yi Mu said that she couldn't stay at home. Moreover, the colleagues in the hotel were very good to her, so she was very reluctant to leave this job. This could only make Yi Xian sigh helplessly, thinking that he would find a chance to persuade Yi Mu in the future. At this moment, Yi Xian and his sister directly entered the hotel. As far as the eye could see, the entire hotel was resplendent and luxurious. Under the guidance of the waiter, Yi Xian and his sister sat down by a window and ordered a few dishes. Yi Xian asked the waiter where Yi Mu was. You mean Aunt Han? She's cleaning somewhere else. I'll call her for you. The waiter walked away quickly, but there was obvious doubt on his face. Those who could come to the Bohai Hotel to spend money were not only high officials and dignitaries, but also rich people. He also didn't understand the relationship between Yi Xian and Yi Mu. Time passed by quickly. When Yi Xian's dishes were served, half an hour had passed, and Yi Xian didn't see Yi Mu, which made Yi Xian feel a little strange. Bohai Hotel, Hall of Flowers. Crack. The sound of glass shattering could be heard, mixed with an extremely angry voice. How do you do things? I'm sorry, manager. I will definitely compensate this young lady. Compensate? How are you going to compensate? Miss Leng doesn't need your compensation. Miss Leng, I'm really sorry. Today is the fault of my hotel staff. Please forgive me. The hotel manager kept bowing and apologizing to Ling Qingxue. Yi Mu stood aside with a pale face, apologizing to Ling Qingxue again and again. Ling Qingxue's face was cold. Her clothes made of natural silk had a big oily color, which was obviously caused by Yi Mu's tableware. Miss Leng, I'm really sorry. Why don't you change your clothes first, and then we'll talk? Zhua Junting looked embarrassed, but still said politely to Ling Qingxue. Miss Zhua, if it were ordinary clothes, it would be fine. But the one my senior sister is wearing is the Ling family's treasure, the 100-year heavenly cicada robe. Do you know the true value of this robe? The young man beside Ling Qingxue said unhappily. Miss, how much is this robe? I can compensate you in full. Yi Mu's face was full of shame. Compensate? The young man's face was extremely cold. He said, it's made of the 100-year heavenly cicada robe. It's invulnerable. Tell me, how are you going to compensate me for this treasure? How are you going to compensate me? Hearing the young man's words, Yi Mu's lips turned white. There was panic in her eyes, but she still said uneasily, don't worry, I'll call now. No matter how much it is, we will compensate you. Get lost. The young man was furious. He suddenly hit Yi Mu with his palm. Yi Mu's body was thrown away, and she spat out a large amount of blood. Obviously, the young man's attack had the intention of taking Yi Mu's life. Forget it. She's just a mortal. Don't bother with her. Leng Qingxue frowned. Manager Li, call her family and send her to the hospital. The Zhua family will cover all the expenses. Although Zhua Junting was dissatisfied with the young man's ruthless attack, she also knew that in the eyes of these ancient martial arts families, the lives of mortals were not really in their eyes. At the same time, Yi Xian was chatting with Yi Ling Per. Suddenly, Yi Xian felt a great pain in his soul. This also made Yi Xian suddenly stand up and release an extremely terrifying divine sense. Mother and son were connected by heart. When Yi Xian's mother was severely injured, Yi Xian immediately showed a great abnormality. The aura around his body instantly became cold. Buzz. When Yi Xian's divine sense spread out, it directly showed the scene of Yi Mu's injury. He also saw Zhua Junting, Leng Qingxue, and the others in the 100 Flowers Blossom Hall. Boom! The heaven and earth shook. Yi Xian took a step forward. In Yi Ling Er's horrified eyes, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared in front of her. This made Yi Ling Er extremely shocked. She could not believe her eyes. Chapter 57. In the 100 Flowers Blooming Hall. Mother Ye's face was as pale as paper and blood kept flowing out of the corner of her mouth. However, Mother Yi had taken the Yun spirit pill before and the medicinal effect had not completely dissolved. It was also because of the Yun spirit pill that Mother Ye's life was saved. Miss Leng, today, boom. Before Zhua Junting could express her goodwill to Leng Qingxue again, there was an earth-shattering explosion. The door of the 100 Flowers Blooming Hall was shattered and wood chips were flying in the air. Yi Xian's aura was cold as he entered the 100 Flowers Blooming Hall. Mr. Yi. Yi Xian's sudden appearance and the terrifying scene caused Zhua Junting's expression to change drastically. She immediately stood up, but when she saw Yi Xian's ferocious face, an extremely bad feeling arose in her heart. Without even looking at Zhua Junting, Yi Xian went straight to Mother Yi. Under the observation of his divine sense, he found that Mother Ye's aura was weak and she had 1 foot in hell. His palm swept through the air and a fiery red pill appeared in his hand. Yi Xian quickly fed it to Mother Yi until there was a trace of color on her face. Yi Xian was relieved. Who are you? Who let you in? The hotel manager was stunned at first and then directly questioned Yi Xian. Boom! The air exploded and Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of the hotel manager before he could finish speaking. When he opened and closed his eyes, there was an extremely violent look in his eyes. Bang! His 5 fingers were like a mountain, destroying everything. Blood, beautiful blood. When Yi Xian's palm landed, the hotel manager's head directly exploded. A headless corpse fell to the ground and dyed the gorgeous floor red. Mr. Yi. Who is she to you? Zhua Junting's body trembled slightly and her face was pale. If she still couldn't see the relationship between Yi Xian and Mother Yi, she would probably call herself an idiot. Today, you, all, must, die. Yi Xian's murderous intent soared to the heavens, and a tyrannical blood-red light slowly rose around him. When he opened his eyes, it was as if the god of the underworld was opening his eyes. That overwhelming murderous intent shook the void, causing Zhua Junting to retreat continuously. A great sense of terror rose in her heart. A dragon had a reverse scale. Touching it would incur its wrath. Why did Yi Xian return to the human world? Yi Xian's mother's kindness in raising him and his filial piety as a son, Yi Xian's mother carried him for 10 months and raised him with great difficulty. She was Yi Xian's biggest taboo. Today, someone had violated Yi Xian's taboo. No matter who they were, whether they had anything to do with this matter or not, their only fate was death. It's you. When he saw Yi Xian's face, the young man who traveled with Leng Qingxue cried out in surprise. His eyes were filled with shock. Thud, thud, thud. The earth trembled and the void exploded. When Yi Xian walked step by step towards the young man, the entire Bohai Hotel shook violently. The surrounding walls quickly cracked as if they were about to collapse at any time. Not good. He's a Xiantian realm martial artist. Seeing such a scene, Ling Qingxue finally couldn't sit still. Panic appeared on her delicate face and a deep sense of fear appeared in her eyes. She no longer had the image of an ice goddess. At this moment, the young man wanted to escape from this place, but he was horrified to find that his body was no longer under his control. He was rooted to the spot as if there was a mountain pressing down on him, making him unable to move his fingers. Yi Xian's face was cruel and ruthless. A tyrannical grin appeared at the corner of his mouth. He raised his jade-like palm and drew a dazzling blood-red light in the void. The dazzling blood-red light lingered in the void, accompanied by the miserable howls of thousands of ghosts. Thousand ghosts devouring soul technique. Yi Xian's voice was very soft, but when his voice sounded, the young man's eyes widened and his teeth chattered. It was as if a voice in his heart was telling him that his fate would be extremely miserable. Woo! A gust of chilly wind swept across the void. Suddenly, ghostly shadows climbed out of the void. The mournful howls became more and more terrifying. While everyone was still in shock and fear, the ghostly shadows seemed to have found food. They all pounced on the young man with horrifying howls. No! Such a horrifying scene made the young man cry out in despair. Crack! Crack! An extremely terrifying thing happened. As the young man cried and begged for mercy, the countless ghostly shadows kept tearing at his flesh. The pale white bones gradually appeared before Zhuo Junting and Ling Qingshue's eyes. Woo! The chilly wind blew and the ghosts howled. In less than a minute, the young man no longer had any signs of life. Only a huge white skeleton appeared in the 100 Flowers blooming hall. Everything was dead silent. Heaven and earth were silent. When the two women saw this scene, they both fell to the ground. Even though Ling Qingxue was an ancient martial arts grandmaster with great strength, she felt extremely helpless in the face of such a strange method. Thousand ghosts devouring soul technique. This was an extremely cruel secret technique. Not only could it devour the flesh and blood of living creatures, but even the soul would become food for the ghosts. In the end, the soul would be scattered and never reincarnated. You're not an ancient martial artist. Who are you? Ling Qingxue trembled as she spoke. She had already discovered this terrible fact. How could an ancient martial artist have such ability? Ancient martial artist? Yi Xian smiled cruelly and slowly shook his head. Who am I? You don't have the right to know. Now it's your turn. The ghosts were howling and the chilly wind was whistling. Yi Xian walked slowly towards Ling Qingxue. He seemed to have turned into an ancient Tao Tai, ready to swallow Ling Qingxue in one gulp. No. Don't come over. Ling Qingxue screamed in horror. Her limp body kept retreating. She looked at Yi Xian with despair in her eyes. Buzz! Yi Xian stretched out his palm. Before Ling Qingxue could react, an extremely terrifying suction force acted on her body. Her whole body flew into the air and was directly sucked in front of Yi Xian. Under Ling Qingshue's fearful eyes, Yi Xian's jade-like palm slowly brushed her cheek. From top to bottom, he brushed her proud body one by one. What a seductive woman. It's a pity that she's going to die here today. Yi Xian's voice was like a devil's whisper. His palm brushed across every part of Ling Qingshue's skin, making the woman's hair stand on end. It was as if she had fallen into hell. Bang! His palm and fingers were like clouds. With a loud explosion, Ling Qingshue's 100-year heavenly cicada robe, which she regarded as a treasure, was directly torn apart by Yi Xian's palm, revealing some of her body. Pfft! Ling Qingxue coughed out a mouthful of blood. Several of her ribs were broken. The extreme pain made her groan. Her body was exposed, but she had no time to cover it up. In the face of life and death, she couldn't care less about these things. No. Don't kill me. I'm from the Ling family of Taipan. If you kill me, the Ling family will not let you go. Ling Qingxue cried out loudly. Crack. A crisp sound came from the throat. Before Ling Qingxue could finish her words, Yi Xian directly broke her neck. Then, he threw her body to the ground like a piece of garbage. The twitching body was extremely terrifying. Rest in peace. Your Ling family will be wiped out soon. They will soon go down to accompany you. Yi Xian's intention was to wipe out the entire family. Chapter 58. It was like the underworld, an Azura slaughterhouse. Pale white bones, headless corpses, and the air was filled with a thick stench of blood that made people want to vomit. Chua Junting was very scared. She was very scared. When she saw the scene in front of her, her soul seemed to leave her body. She could not believe what she was seeing. Dong, dong, dong. A series of heavy footsteps came. Yi Xian slowly walked towards her. This also made Chua Junting quickly come to her senses. She staggered backward. Yi. Mr. Yi. You want to kill me? Chua Junting said in a trembling voice. Looking at the frightened Chua Junting, Yi Xian slowly shook his head. There was no pity in his eyes. If I did not appear at the right time today, wouldn't my mother have died in vain? Yi Xian's tyrannical mood had already calmed down, but his voice was still cold and emotionless. Go in peace. I'll leave your corpse intact. Yi Xian pointed his sword and a ray of sword energy formed between his fingers. It was as if he would kill Chua Junting in the next moment. Xian. Little Xian. Don't kill anyone. Suddenly, without waiting for Yi Xian to act ruthlessly, Yi Xian's extremely weak voice came from behind him. This also made Yi Xian's expression change. He looked deeply at Chua Junting and waved his sword energy away. Then, he came to Yi Xian's mother's side. Mom, let's go home. He bent over and picked up Yi Xian's mother. Under Chua Junting's lifeless gaze, Yi Xian also disappeared from the 100 Flowers blooming hall. The Bohai Hotel was in chaos. Countless dining customers scrambled to escape because the entire Bohai Hotel was experiencing a strong earthquake. However, when these customers escaped the hotel, they found that everything was normal. The so-called earthquake seemed to be an illusion. Yi Linger stood outside the hotel. Her face was full of anxiety. Although she was surprised that Yi Xian suddenly disappeared, she was even more worried about where Yi Xian went. This big brother of hers was really too mysterious. Ling, let's go home. At some point, Yi Xian suddenly appeared beside Yi Linger with Mother Yi in his arms. When Yi Linger saw that Mother Yi was unconscious with blood at the corner of her mouth, she had no time to care about Yi Xian's mysteriousness. She immediately asked anxiously, Mom, what's wrong? Something happened. Fortunately, it's not life-threatening, Yi Xian said solemnly. Brother, let's go to the hospital. There's no need. Even the hospital can't save him. I have my ways. After Yi Xian finished speaking, he casually hailed a taxi and the family headed straight home. Biyun Pavilion, Yi Xian's home. Yi Xian's palms danced in the air. Streaks of blood-red light filled the air and continuously poured into Mother Yi, who was lying on the bed. Only when the broken bones in Mother Ye's chest recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye and her breathing began to become even did Yi Xian stop. The heavy stone in his heart was quietly lifted. From the beginning to the end, Yi Linger had been watching Yi Xian cast spells to save her mother. Her eyes were filled with surprise from time to time. She felt that the big brother in front of her was extremely strange. Brother, who are you? Yi Ling'er said uneasily. Little sister, this world is very, very big. There are many things that you don't understand. When the time is right, I will naturally tell you, Yi Xian said calmly. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Yi Ling'er nodded and said, Brother, is mother okay? Many of her bones are broken and her internal organs are injured. Fortunately, I treated her in time. Now, she is not in danger. Her body is a little weak. You stay here and take care of her. I will go out to do something. Yi Xian said to his little sister and directly walked out of the house. Jiangnan's hanging mirror department. Lu Jundai frowned as she stared at Yi Xian in front of her. A trace of shame and anger flashed across her eyes. Don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you have the support of the Wu Pen department. Also, I am not your subordinate. What right do you have to order me around? Lu Jundai said angrily. Yi Xian looked at Lu Jundai calmly. He tapped his fingers on the table and said, I don't want to talk too much with you. I am now ordering you as the guest of the Wu Pen department. No matter what method you use, find out everything about the Ling family of Tai Pen. Impossible. Lu Jundai slammed the table and stood up. Yi Xian slowly got up. A cruel smile appeared on his face. He walked out of the office. However, his cold voice echoed in Lu Jundi's ears. You can try and see what will happen if you don't listen to my orders. Seeing Yi Xian disappear, Lu Jundi's eyes turned red. Her eyes were filled with tears because Yi Xian had gone too far. Crack. The glass on the desk was shattered by Lu Jundai. You despicable bastard. Lu Jundai roared in anger. After venting her anger, Lu Jundai calmed down completely. She knew that Yi Xian was a cold-blooded person. There was nothing that he did not dare to do. Lu Jundai picked up the phone and dialed. Azure Dragon's voice came from the other end of the phone. Hello, what is it? Lu Jundai quickly recounted everything that happened at the Bohai Hotel. She also told him that Yi Xian had ordered her to investigate the Ling family. This made Azure Dragon on the other end of the phone silent for a long time. The Ling family is an ancient martial arts family. This is a serious matter. Don't do anything for now. Let me talk to Mr. Yi first. Azure Dragon said seriously and hung up the phone. At the same time, in the Zhuo family, Elder Zhuo's face was solemn. There was panic in his eyes. Zhuo Junting stood in front of him with her eyes lowered. It was as if she had made a grave mistake. Junting, I've watched you grow up. I've always had high hopes for you. But this time, you've disappointed me. Elder Zhuo scolded coldly. Grandpa, shut up. Elder Zhuo paced back and forth in the living room. Then, he suddenly looked at Zhuo Junting and said, I've told you before. This Mr. Yi is not an ordinary person. He only has a mother and a sister. You don't even know his mother. How can I trust you with the Zhuo family? Grandpa, I was wrong. But it has happened. What should we do? Zhuo Junting said with a pale face. What should we do? Elder Zhuo's face was gloomy. There was a struggle in his eyes. It was obvious that he was making a decision. In fact, the reason why Ling Qingxue came to Jiangnan City was that Elder Zhuo had paid a lot of money to the Ling family to find out the truth about him being haunted by ghosts. Originally, Elder Zhuo wanted to visit Yi Xian in person. Firstly, he wanted to get closer to him. Secondly, he wanted to ask Yi Xian to help him find the real culprit. However, Yi Xian's whereabouts were erratic and he was often not at home. He did not have the chance to visit him. That was why Ling Qingxue came to Jiangnan City. But now, Ling Qingxue had died in Jiangnan City. As the inviters, the Zhuo family had an unshirkable responsibility. When the Ling family found out about this, they would definitely punish the Zhuo family. The Zhuo family could not bear the consequences. Now, Elder Zhuo only had two choices. First, he could quickly tell the Leng family about this and push all the blame to Yi Xian. This was the only way to protect the Zhuo family. Second, he could completely offend the Leng family and completely stand on Yi Xian's side to make up for Zhuo Junting's mistake. This could also ease the relationship between the Zhuo family and Yi Xian. This was a choice that concerned the survival of the Zhuo family. How could Elder Zhuo not be troubled? Dad, we can't offend the Leng family. In my opinion, we should quickly tell the Leng family about this, Zhuo Wenbin suggested. No, this Mr. Yi saved our father's life. If we do that, wouldn't it be too dishonorable? Zhuo Wenshan refuted. Brother, we can't afford to offend the Leng family. Do you want to see the Zhuo family destroyed? Zhuo Wenbin scolded coldly. Enough, I'm not dead yet. What are you guys arguing about? Elder Zhuo scolded his two sons angrily. Then, he said in a low voice, I'll personally visit this Mr. Yi tonight. As for what to do, we'll talk about it when I come back. Chapter 59. Yi Xian was currently in a bad mood. He was truly in a good mood. When Yi Xian was in a bad mood, only slaughter could calm his tyrannical mood. However, he suppressed this emotion for the time being. Although Ling Qingxue and the others were killed by him, the matter wasn't over yet. Just like Yi Xian said, not only did Yi Xian want to kill her, he also wanted to exterminate the entire family behind her. However, Yi Xian's mother's injury was a wake-up call for Yi Xian. He finally realized that his family's safety could not be guaranteed without him by their side. Moreover, the blood-soul strange beast was dormant in the mortal world. Although there was no movement now, it would break out sooner or later. Giving his family some means to protect themselves was what he should do. Prepare for a rainy day and be vigilant in times of peace. Yi Xian thought for a long time and finally came up with a way that was not a way. Refining weapons and setting up formations. As a cultivator, Yi Xian's ability to refine weapons and set up formations was absolutely second to none. However, even the cleverest housewife could not cook without rice. Although Yi Xian had the ability to refine weapons and set up formations, the materials for refining weapons and setting up formations were very difficult to find. This was also a problem that troubled Yi Xian. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration flashed through Yi Xian's mind. The materials used for refining weapons and setting up formations were naturally all kinds of heaven and earth treasures. However, in this Dharma-ending age, heaven and earth treasures were even more difficult to find due to the lack of spiritual qi. However, there were still substitutes. Jade, the best jade. Only jade that had existed for more than 100 years could be used as a material for refining weapons and setting up formations. Although the effect would be greatly reduced, it was the only way now. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts and made a decision. He took a taxi and asked the driver to go directly to the largest auction house in Jiangnan City. The dazzling auction house. It was a well-known auction house in Jiangnan City. Everything that was auctioned here was authentic and would never be adulterated. With decades of good reputation, the dazzling auction house grew bigger and bigger. In Jiangnan City, it was the only one. When it came to jade and antiques, there was an old saying, if you don't open for 3 years, open for 3 years. From this, it could be seen how profitable the antique jade market was. As for the dazzling auction house, it only auctioned twice a year. Usually, the auction house was not open to the public, but today, an extraordinary guest had arrived. Inside the auction house, Yi Xian sat lazily on the sofa. A black card was placed on the coffee table. A middle-aged man in a suit was looking at Yi Xian with a troubled expression. Mr. Yi, if you really want to buy some jade, please wait until the auction opens after the new year. This is also the rule of our dazzling auction house. Please understand. As the person in charge of the dazzling auction house, how could Gu Shangyun not recognize the black card on the table? People who could hold such a card were worth at least 1 billion yuan. However, the auction house had its own rules, and it was impossible to break them for Yi Xian. First of all, I don't have time to come again. And your so-called rules, in my opinion, are just made by someone. Yi Xian's attitude was very strong, but he was not here to find trouble. He continued, of course, I won't embarrass you. In addition to buying your jade at the normal price, I also have something to auction here. This is enough to make up for your loss. A milky white pill was casually placed on the table by Yi Xian. A fragrant aroma filled the air. This also made Gu Shangyun, who was about to refuse, suddenly stop. His eyes were filled with curiosity as he said, Mr. Yi, this is a Peiyuan pill. As long as a person is not dead, it can save their life. Yi Xian did not talk nonsense and directly explained the effect of the Peiyuan pill. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Gu Shangyun's face slightly changed. He looked at Yi Xian with a somewhat unfriendly gaze. Mr. Yi, your joke is not funny at all. Yi Xian could completely feel Gu Shangyun's unfriendly attitude. This also made him squint his eyes and said, I have never had the habit of joking. Go and call the person in charge here. I don't have time to dawdle with you. Seeing that Yi Xian was not joking, Gu Shangyun did not dare to be careless. He was afraid that Yi Xian had a great background. This also made him uncertain. He then nodded and quickly went to find the person in charge. Time passed very quickly. In less than 10 minutes, Gu Shangyun returned with a beautiful and sexy figure following behind him. Ha ha ha. Mr. Yi, is the pill you spoke of really so magical? A charming laugh seemed to be able to steal people's souls, causing endless fanciful thoughts to arise in people's hearts. Gu Wan was wearing a hot red dress. Her delicate and enchanting face and curvy body revealed an indescribable sexiness, as if she could arouse the deepest desire in a man's heart. An ancient warrior, and an ancient martial arts master. I didn't expect a person like you to be hidden in a small Jiangnan city. Yi Xian smiled as he looked at the sexy and enchanting Gu Waner in front of him. He never thought that he would actually meet an ancient martial grandmaster just by buying some jade artifacts. Could it be that the ancient martial grandmasters were all rotten on the streets? As Yi Xian's voice fell, Gu Wan's charming smile suddenly froze. She looked at Yi Xian with great caution. Who are you? Gu Wan's charming smile disappeared, and her face instantly turned cold. Her red dress fluttered even though there was no wind, as if she was going to attack Yi Xian at any time. Looking at Gu Wan's appearance as if she was facing a great enemy, Yi Xian smiled contemptuously and said, Don't worry, I am not your enemy, and I have no intention of investigating why there is an ancient martial arts master in a small auction house. You can see my cultivation. It seems that Mr. Yi is not ordinary. If you really just want to buy some jade, I am willing to make friends with you. Gu Wan withdrew her aura and said to Yi Xian in a tentative voice. I don't want to talk nonsense. I want a lot of jade. I will buy it at the original price, and this foundation elixir is enough to make up for your loss. Yi Xian went straight to the point. He did not have time to pretend to be polite with this woman. Speaking of the main topic, Gu Wan took a deep look at Yi Xian, then nodded and said, If this elixir is really as magical as you say, all of this will not be a problem. Soon, under Gu Wan's command, Gu Shangyun carefully scraped a little powder from the foundation elixir and fed it directly to a wounded and dying white mouse. However, in less than a minute, an extremely mystical scene appeared. The little white mouse, which was on the verge of death, actually stood up energetically. It kept squeaking in the cage, and the wounds on its body were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Such a scene made Gu Wan suddenly stand up from her seat. She looked at the foundation elixir on the table with great enthusiasm in her eyes. This. As a member of the Gu family, Gu Wan had seen all kinds of rare elixirs, but the effect of the foundation elixir made her unable to control her excitement. Chapter 60. As an ancient martial arts master, no one knew the importance of the pill better than Gu Wan. It was a life. Even if one had innate martial arts or unparalleled power, it was nothing compared to one's own life. 10 breaths later, Gu Wan finally calmed down. She directly ordered Gu Shangyun, "Go and bring all the jade items for Mr. Yi to choose from." Looking at the scene before him, Yi Xian was not surprised at all. The energy-enhancing pill was the lowest-level pill for cultivators, but in the eyes of these ancient martial artists, it was no less than the legendary elixir. However, the energy-enhancing pill was refined from the blood essence of the beasts in the Blood Sea. Although it seemed to be very effective, it had a great drawback. The lifespan of the person who took the pill would not exceed 10 years. Of course, Yi Xian would not tell her about this. Even if he did, Gu Wan would be a little disappointed, but she would definitely regard the pill as a treasure. After all, it was already a great blessing for a dying person to be able to live for 10 more years. Soon, all kinds of jade items were sent over. As Yi Xian picked and chose, more than 10 jade pendants and 2 jade sword pendants were taken by him. As for the other jade items, he directly ignored them. "Mr. Yi, how much is this pill? Do you still have this kind of pill?" Seeing that Yi Xian had finished choosing, Gu Wan held the energy-enhancing pill tightly in her hand, as if she was afraid that Yi Xian would go back on his word. "The price is up to you guys to decide. As for this pill, I obtained it by chance. It's just this one," Yi Xian said calmly. Obviously, Gu Wan did not believe Yi Xian. If there was only one such precious pill, how could the man in front of her be willing to auction it? However, Gu Wan's mind was clear, so she naturally did not continue to ask. After exchanging phone numbers with Yi Xian walked out of the auction house under Gu Wan's respectful escort. Seeing that Yi Xian had already walked far away, Gu Shangyun asked in a low voice, "Miss, should we send someone to follow him and investigate his background?" Gu Wan shook her head with a serious look in her eyes. She said, "Don't act rashly. This man can see that I am an ancient martial grandmaster, but I can't see through his cultivation. This man is definitely above me. If others find out that we sent someone to follow him, I'm afraid there will be great trouble." "But are we really going to auction this pill?" Gu Xiangyun asked in a low voice. "How could such a precious pill be auctioned? It's just a formality. When the time comes, the pill will naturally be sent back to the family," Gu Wan said confidently. Although Yi Xian was already far away, the conversation between the two fell clearly into his ears. Yi Xian liked to deal with smart people. There was no doubt that Gu Wan was a smart person. She knew who she could provoke and who she could not. This made Yi Xian very satisfied with this woman. As for where the foundation elixir would go, Yi Xian did not care at all. As long as Gu Wan could continuously provide him with jade articles, it would not matter even if he gave the foundation elixir to her. But if she was greedy and wanted to do something to him, the woman's fate would be extremely miserable. Yi Xian's principle was that what I gave you was yours. If you wanted to forcefully take what I didn't give you, then the only outcome would be death. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts and went straight home. Now that he had these jade articles, although he could not set up a powerful formation, it was more than enough to ensure the safety of his family. Biyun Pavilion, Yi Xian's home. The sun was setting in the west and night fell. Mother Yi woke up early, but her face was a little pale. Apparently, her body was still a little weak, and her spirit was a little sluggish. "Ling, where is your brother?" Mother Yi asked softly. "Brother went out. He should be back soon," Yi Ling said obediently. Sigh. Mother Yi sighed with a complicated look in her eyes. In the Bohai Hotel, although she was injured and unconscious, she knew that Yi Xian had killed someone. This made her worried for Yi Xian. She was afraid that the hanging mirror department would come and put Yi Xian in jail. "Mother, are you feeling better?" The door was gently pushed open. Yi Xian entered the house with a smile and came to Mother Ye's side. "I'm fine, but you," Mother Yi wanted to say something but hesitated. How could Yi Xian not see the worry in Mother Ye's eyes? "Don't worry, everything has been resolved," Yi Xian comforted her. Looking at Yi Xian's smiling face, Mother Yi knew that Yi Xian had his own secrets. Since he did not tell her, if she continued to ask, it would only make things difficult for Yi Xian. Dong dong dong. A series of knocks came from outside the door, which made Yi Xian extend his consciousness. When the scene outside the door appeared in his mind, Yi Xian told Yi Ling, to take care of her mother and turned to open the door. The door was opened, and Grandfather Zhua and Zhua Junting were standing outside. When they saw Yi Xian, Grandfather Zhua said with shame, "We came without permission today. I hope Mr. Yi Xian will forgive us." Looking at the grandfather and granddaughter in front of him, Yi Xian's face was expressionless. It was as if he already knew that the Zhua family would come to visit. He did not say anything and went straight to the living room. Grandfather Zhua and Zhua Junting quickly followed. In the living room, Yi Xian leaned on the sofa. Grandfather Zhua and Zhua Junting looked awkward, not knowing whether to stand or sit. In this oppressive atmosphere, Yi Xian broke the silence and said, "I don't want to ask about the relationship between the Zhua family and that woman, and I don't want to know why you are here today." As Yi Xian spoke to hear, he took a deep look at the old man on the table and continued, "Right now, I only want to know all the information about Tai Enzling family. If you don't want to tell me, you can leave now." Yi Xian's attitude was very direct. He only gave old man Zhua two choices. Either he told him about the Lin clan, or he left this place. This also made the excuse that old man Zhua had prepared completely useless. Mr. Yi. Thank you for saving my life." Without waiting for old man Zhua to finish speaking, Yi Xian waved his hand and interrupted, "Back then, I sold that jade talisman to your Zhua family for 2 million. Your Zhua family and I don't owe each other anything. There's no need to mention this again." Obviously, Yi Xian didn't have any plans to deal with old man Zhua. This caused old man Zhua to frown. He didn't know if he should tell Yi Xian what kind of existence the Lin clan was. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled into a cold smile as he looked at the old man's hesitant expression. He directly ordered, "I've already given you a chance. It's your table family that doesn't cherish it. You can leave now." Grandfather Zhua wanted to say something, but when he saw Yi Xian's cold eyes, he swallowed his words. He then sighed helplessly and left the Yi family with Zhua Junting. "Brother, who are they?" Yi Ling walked out of the house with a puzzled look on her face. "Ha!" Yi Xian's eyes narrowed as he sneered, "They're just some idiots." Chapter 61. Summoning the wind and summoning the rain, casting beams to form soldiers, these were the legendary abilities of immortals. However, as an immortal cultivator, Yi Xian was able to summon the wind and summon the rain, but he did not have the ability to cast beams to form soldiers. However, it was not a problem for him to set up a large trap and kill a ray. Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the void, his palms turning into a circle. Streaks of blood-red runes appeared from the void, instantly merging into the jade in front of him. The 12 jade pieces emitted blood-red light, dancing and circling around him. As Yi Xian's sword finger cut through the void, the jade pieces suddenly disappeared, completely sinking into the void. Buzz! The void changed, and ripples spread out. When Yi Xian finished doing all this, the entire villa within a radius of 1,000 meters suddenly fell into a peaceful atmosphere. Only the blood-red light that was invisible to the naked eye crisscrossed, lingering in this space. Spirit Trapping Array. The array that Yi Xian set up, other than having the effect of hallucination, also had the ability to kill the enemy. The jade pieces were only a medium, the real method was the blood evil chi that was imbued into the jade pieces. The two jade sword pendants were originally jade green, but after Yi Xian engraved the 3 arrays, the 2 jade sword pendants directly turned blood red. Only then did Yi Xian nod his head in satisfaction. Yi Ling'er had been watching from the side. She had some understanding of Yi Xian's miraculous methods, so naturally, she did not show too much surprise. Yi Xian handed the jade sword pendants to his little sister and said in a serious voice, "Ling'er, wear these 2 pendants separately with your mother. Do not let them leave your body day and night." "Okay." Yi Ling'er obediently replied and kept the jade sword pendants. She originally wanted to say something to Yi Xian, but when she saw that Yi Xian was deep in thought, she swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth. "Brother, I'm going to see mother." There was a complicated look in Yi Ling'er's eyes. Just as she was about to silently walk out of Yi Xian's room, Yi Ling'er suddenly turned back to look at Yi Xian. In a hesitant voice, she said, "Brother, you once said that if you were no longer here, I would take good care of mother. Will you really leave one day?" Yi Xian was originally immersed in his thoughts. When Yi Ling'er's voice rang out, his expression suddenly froze. He then looked at his little sister with a slightly complicated gaze. After a few breaths, Yi Xian slowly shook his head and sighed. He did not answer this question. "Brother, it's too late. You should rest early." Yi Ling'er forced a smile and quickly walked out of Yi Xian's room. Although Yi Xian did not give an answer, how could Yi Ling'er not see Yi Xian's attitude? Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the void, the aura around him fluctuating slightly. He really wanted to tell his family that as early as 4 years ago, the former him had already died. He could no longer go back. From the moment he entered the Blood Sea battlefield, he was destined to spend his life in killing. Playing games with Yuan Ling, fighting against the heavens for his life, stepping on the bones of countless powerhouses until he ascended to the 9 heavens. This was his path, and everything in the mortal world was just a formality. In the end, he did not belong here. Ring ring ring. A series of urgent ringtones sounded. It was slightly ear-piercing in the middle of the night. When he saw that the caller was Azure Dragon, Yi Xian's eyes did not show any surprise. "Hello." Yi Xian picked up the phone. "Mr. Yi, Lu Jundai has already reported to me about the Ling family. I hope you can give up on this matter." Azure Dragon said bluntly. "Why?" Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. "Mr. Yi, you may not know this. Although the Martial Security Department has 8 departments, most of the members are from ancient martial arts families. These families are detached from worldly affairs and have always had a cooperative relationship with the Xia country. Some of the foreign special ability organizations are also afraid of the Xia country because of the existence of these ancient martial arts families." Azure Dragon quickly said, hoping that Yi Xian would consider the big picture. "Mr. Yi, although I don't know why you are investigating the Ling family has a strong foundation. No one knows if there are any Xiantian realm martial artists in the Ling family. Moreover, you have already killed Ling Qingxue. Why don't we just let this matter go?" Azure Dragon continued to persuade. The ancient martial arts families were a group of interests. Since ancient times, they had been involved in every dynasty. If Yi Xian really went against the Ling family, it would be a matter of great concern. "Let it go." Yi Xian smiled and said in a strange voice, "I killed that woman. Even if I am willing to turn weapons of war into gifts of jade and silk, how can the Ling family let it go?" If Azure Dragon saw the smile on Yi Xian's face, he would definitely be shocked. However, he thought that Yi Xian was willing to let this matter go. This made Azure Dragon anxious. "Although this matter is not easy to deal with, Mr. Yi, you are a guest of my team. The Ling family will not dare to do anything to you in public. When the time comes, I will personally apologize to the Ling family and let this matter go. Apologize? Yi Xian's smile became more and more strange, and his voice suddenly became cold. There is no need for an apology. I will deal with this matter personally. Even though they were on the phone, Azure Dragon felt a chill run down his spine when he heard Yi Xian's gloomy voice. He was stunned and asked, Mr. Yi, what are you trying to do? If you hurt my mother, your entire family will be exterminated. Yi Xian casually hung up the phone, causing Azure Dragon, who was on the other end of the phone, to be stunned. Only after 10 breaths did he regain his senses and quickly call Yi Xian again. However, after waiting for a long time, Yi Xian did not pick up. Something big is going to happen. Azure Dragon trembled as he muttered to himself. After making several calls, Azure Dragon had no choice but to report this matter to the few big shots. At this moment, the Grand Marshal of China, Li Lingguo, had a calm expression as he listened to Azure Dragon's report. After 10 minutes, Li Lingguo narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, other than Yi Xian's actions that harm China, you can do anything for him in the future. If even you can't handle it, there are still us old men. Li Lingguo casually hung up the phone. His old palm continuously knocked on the table. After a long time, he muttered to himself. It's time for China's situation to change. These ancient martial arts families are arrogant. It's time for someone to teach them a lesson. After receiving Li Lingguo's reply, Azure Dragon was stunned. He could not imagine that Li Lingguo, as the Grand Marshal of China, would give such an order. However, an order was an order. Even if Azure Dragon did not understand, he could only follow Li Lingguo's orders. A series of information about the Ling family was gathered together and sent directly to Yi Xian's phone through text messages. A silent massacre was about to begin. At the same time, at Fengming Mountain, Tai An's Ling family. A simple manor stood in the middle of the mountain. The ground was paved with green mound stones and various ancient martial arts weapons were placed on it. Dozens of ancient martial arts practitioners with majestic auras were sitting cross-legged and cultivating. Some were waving their fists and legs, causing the air to explode. Chapter 62. Ling Clan's Inner Hall. A middle-aged man wearing an ancient robe sat at the head of the table. Below him were 2 old men sitting upright. The atmosphere in the entire inner hall was slightly oppressive, as if something was brewing. Yi Xian, the head of the Ling clan, muttered to himself. When he opened and closed his eyes, a cold killing intent flashed through them. The Zhuo clan has sent news that the young mist died at the hands of this person. Moreover, this person's identity is not simple. After our investigation, this person is a guest of the Wuan department. An old man said slowly. Qing Shui's talent is unparalleled, and she has already stepped into the ancient martial grandmaster realm at such a young age. In the future, it is very likely that she will go one step further and become a pre-celestial stage martial artist, and even allow our Ling clan to rise in the ancient martial world. But she died just like that. What do you think I should do? The head of the Ling clan smiled brightly, but when the 2 old men saw it, they couldn't help but shiver. Patriarch, this person is a guest of the Wuan department. We should think twice before we act. The other old man carefully advised. Bang! With a loud sound, the head of the Ling clan slammed the table and stood up. The stone table in front of him was directly smashed into pieces. The smile on his face had already disappeared, and the expression on his face was even more ferocious and frightening. My daughter is dead, she's dead. What guest of the Wuan department? My Ling clan also has a lot of authority in the Wuan department. I don't care who he is, I will make him die without a burial ground. The head of the Ling clan roared angrily, and the bluestone ground beneath his feet cracked to the extreme. Immediately inform Ling Yunfei. Within 3 days, I want all the information on this person. Not only do I want him to die, I also want his family to be buried with him." The head of the Ling clan roared furiously. The sky was filled with clouds for thousands of miles. While the head of the Ling clan was investigating Yi Xian, he did not know that a blood-red meteor had set off from Jiangnan and was shooting towards Fengming Mountain. The air trembled and ripples spread out. With every step Yi Xian took, explosive sounds could be heard from beneath his feet. His expression was very calm, so calm that it was somewhat puzzling, but the killing intent that flashed in his eyes when he opened and closed them was extremely frightening. Yi Xian understood this principle very well. If you don't remove the roots, the grass. Inin. As long as it was an enemy, the only outcome was death. This was Yi Xian's belief. Half a day passed. When Yi Xian appeared in the sky above Fengming Mountain, the originally cold winter weather suddenly darkened. There was even a black cloud that covered the entire Fengming Mountain. Yi. Is. Bang. Yi Xian stomped on the ground, shaking the mountains. The ground of the martial arts practice field cracked like a spider web. Such a frightening scene immediately made the Ling clan members in the martial arts practice field speechless. They only woke up when they saw Yi Xian. Senior brother. Did this person fall from the sky? A young warrior couldn't believe what he was seeing. He asked his senior martial brother next to him in a low voice. Don't joke. How can a person fly? The senior brother reprimanded in a trembling voice. Obviously, he did not understand how Yi Xian appeared in the Ling clan's martial arts practice field. At this moment, dozens of martial artists looked at Yi Xian. It was obvious that they hadn't recovered from their shock yet. Only when a mournful howl sounded out did they instantly recover from their shock. Chi. Sword light streaked across the sky and blood splattered. A Ling clan warrior was beheaded and turned into a cold corpse in front of the Ling clan members. Yi Xian did not waste any time. He came to the Ling clan to slaughter them. He was not in the mood to talk to these mortals. What he wanted to do was to directly slaughter them. Hua! A large number of exclamations were heard. The martial arts practice field was in a mess. Before the Ling clan warriors could do anything, Yi Xian took a step forward and the bloodthirsty demon sword appeared in his hand. Dazzling sword light spread out and began to reap the lives of the people present. Don't kill me. Who are you? Quickly inform the patriarch that a great enemy is here. Blood rained down and limbs were severed. Amidst the endless wails and screams, dozens of Ling clan warriors fled in a sorry state. However, they could not avoid the sword light slashed by Yi Xian. The martial arts practice field had turned into a slaughterhouse. Stop! Suddenly, a thunderous roar was heard. 3 figures approached from afar, followed by a large number of Ling clan warriors. In the blink of an eye, Yi Xian was surrounded. The master of the Ling family was at the peak of the Grand Master realm. He was only 1 step away from entering the primordial realm. The 2 elders beside him were also martial artists at the Grand Master realm. Although they were old, they were not to be underestimated. Who are you? How dare you kill people in my Ling clan? Looking at the corpses on the ground, the patriarch of the Ling clan looked gloomy, but there was a hint of fear in his eyes. The weakest of these Ling clan disciples was at the covert power realm, and there were as many as a dozen of them at the peak power realm. However, they were all dead in a short time. How could he not be shocked? Most importantly, the patriarch of the Ling clan discovered a terrible fact. The young man in black standing in front of him was releasing an extremely terrifying aura. The patriarch of the Ling clan was very sure that although he was an ancient martial arts grandmaster, he was definitely no match for this person. Moreover, it was very likely that this person had stepped into the primordial realm. Otherwise, how could he slaughter dozens of Ling clan warriors in an instant? Rumble. Dark clouds covered the sky and thunder rumbled. Yi Xian held the bloodthirsty demon sword and stood in the Lin clan's martial arts field. Looking at the gloomy expression of the patriarch of the Lin clan, a cruel smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Very good. It seems that everyone is here. Yi Xian nodded slowly with a smile on his face. May I know who you are? What has my Lin clan done to offend you? If it's really my Lin clan's fault, I would like to apologize to you. As the saying goes, a wise man submits to circumstances. When the patriarch of the Lin clan estimated that Yi Xian might be a primordial realm warrior, he immediately suppressed the killing intent in his heart and humbled himself. Patriarch, he is Yi Xian. Suddenly, an elder's pupils shrank as he cried out in horror. What? Hearing the elder's words, the patriarch of the Lin clan looked at Yi Xian abruptly. His expression was extremely ugly. He had never thought that before he had gone to look for Yi Xian had already killed his way to the Lin clan. Yi Xian looked at them indifferently. However, the way he looked at the Lin clan members was as if he was looking at dead people. Yi Xian had not only come here today to slaughter the entire clan. The hundreds of ancient martial artists present were also the best food. The blood qi in their bodies was more vigorous than that of ordinary people, which could make up for the cultivation that he had been constantly consuming during this period. In the blood sea battlefield, there were strange beasts that provided him with blood qi. Therefore, Yi Xian was able to raise his cultivation to the crossing calamity stage in just 4 years. However, after returning to the city, every time he fought, his cultivation would decrease a little. Without replenishment, if this continued for a long time, his cultivation would definitely regress. This was something that Yi Xian did not want to see. Moreover, the blood-soul strange beasts were lurking in the human world. They were gradually devouring flesh and blood to restore their strength. If Yi Xian's cultivation remained stagnant, wouldn't he suffer a great loss when he really faced these things? Yi Xian had a delusion. He wanted to become an immortal in the mortal world. In order to achieve this goal, other than opening the door and entering the so-called Earth Immortal realm, he could only continuously devour blood qi to improve his cultivation. Yi Xian really wanted to see how Yuanling would feel when he became an immortal in the mortal world. At that time, he would truly fall out with Yuanling. Chapter 63. The patriarch of the Lin clan was in a very complicated mood. He really wanted to chop Yi Xian into pieces and avenge Ling Qingxue. However, the facts in front of him told him that Yi Xian's cultivation had definitely surpassed the Grandmaster realm. Although the Lin clan had the advantage in numbers, they were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered in the face of a suspected Khanate realm martial artist. When a martial artist stepped into the Khanate realm, it was a qualitative improvement. A Khanate realm martial artist could kill 10 Grandmasters. From this, one could see how terrifying a Khanate realm martial artist was. Although he was angry, the master of the Lin clan did not dare to show his anger. His expression was even more uncertain. After a few breaths, a forced smile appeared on the master of the Lin clan's face. He directly cupped his hands and bowed to Yi Xian. So it's Mr. Yi. I wonder if my Lin clan has offended you in any way to make you unhappy. I'm here to apologize. People under the eaves had to bow their heads. This was the master of the Lin clan's decision. From your resentful eyes, I can see that you want to kill me. Even if you try to hide it, your eyes betrayed you, Yi Xian said indifferently. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the master of the Lin clan's heart thumped. He then continued to force a smile. Mr. Yi, you must be joking. My daughter deserved to die in your hands. How could my Lin clan dare to be angry? As the saying goes, one does not hit a smiling face. The master of the Lin clan was so humble. If Yi Xian continued to slaughter the Lin clan, it would be too much of a bully. If it were someone else, they might really leave. However, who was Yi Xian? He was the immortal heavenly lord, an existence that surpassed mortals. He believed in the strong and should do things to the extreme. Since he had decided to destroy the Lin clan, no one could go against his decision. In other words, if I'm strong enough to bully your Lin clan, what can you do? Die. These two simple words came out of Yi Xian's mouth. The bloodthirsty demon sword buzzed and shot out from Yi Xian's hand, turning into a bloody light that slashed towards the Lin clan. Under such circumstances, how could the Lin clan's patriarch not see Yi Xian's intentions? This made his expression turn ferocious, and he was already prepared to fight with his life on the line. Little bastard, even if you are a Xiantian realm warrior, do you really think that my Lin clan is afraid of you? Kill him. Since there was no room for negotiation, the master of the Lin clan did not waste his breath. Clang clang clang. The sounds of swords and sabers being unsheathed rang out incessantly. As the Ling family patriarch roared, over 100 Ling family martial artists charged towards Yi Xian without fear of death. Obviously, they had no way out. Either Yi Xian died, or the Ling family perished. Slash. Blood splashed across the sky, and sword chi exploded. Yi Xian did not move, and the smile on his face was still there. His two sword fingers shook the void, and the bloodthirsty demon sword trembled violently. With every slash, more than a dozen Ling family martial artists turned into corpses. Blood splattered everywhere, and mournful cries rang out. Over 100 Ling family martial artists fell one after another, and a large amount of blood stained the ground. This also made their eyes turn red, and they looked at Yi Xian with extreme hatred. Looking at the Ling clan's disciples dying tragically, a Ling clan elder gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. He looked at Yi Xian with an extremely crazy gaze. Yi Xian, even if this old man self-destructs here today, I won't let you have an easy time. The Ling clan elder roared crazily, and his stooped body began to swell. Like a balloon that was about to explode, he rushed towards Yi Xian crazily. Second uncle, don't. The master of the Ling clan roared in horror. Bang! His body exploded, and blood rained down. Under the Ling clan elder's self-destruction, an extremely terrifying energy burst out. Yi Xian bore the brunt of this energy and was completely submerged by it. Second grandpa. A Ling clan youth cried out loudly and knelt on the ground. Large amounts of tears flowed from his eyes. Broken limbs and blood flowed like a river. The entire martial arts practice field was completely silent. After a dozen breaths, a trembling voice came from a Ling clan martial artist. Is he dead? When a grandmaster self-destructs, his strength will increase tenfold. Even if he's a connate martial artist, there's no way he can survive. The master of the Ling clan scolded coldly, but there was great pain in his eyes. His beloved daughter had died tragically, and the Ling clan elder had self-destructed. The Ling clan had lost 2 grandmasters in a row. This heavy blow made the master of the Ling clan extremely distressed. Wait, he's not dead yet. Suddenly, a scream of horror was heard. The Ling clan members' expressions changed drastically, and they all looked towards the center of the martial arts practice field. When the smoke and dust dissipated, the bloody light was hazy. When Yi Xian appeared in front of the Ling clan members again, the weak-minded members of the Ling clan fell to the ground with their legs weak. They looked at Yi Xian with extreme horror. At this moment, not to mention being injured, Yi Xian's clothes didn't even have the slightest crease. It was as if the self-destruction of the Ling clan's elder didn't cause him any harm at all. This is so boring. Yi Xian stretched his arms and breathed in the bloody smell in the air. When he opened and closed his eyes, a trace of intoxication flashed across them. Let's end this. Yi Xian finally began to feel bored, and his voice became cold and cruel. Boom! He took a step forward and stepped into the sky. The sound of an explosion came from the void. Under the horrified gazes of the Ling clan members, Yi Xian sat cross-legged high in the sky, and a hazy bloody light slowly bloomed around his body. He's not an ancient warrior, he is. Looking at this scene, the master of the Leng clan's face turned pale, and his teeth chattered. An ancient legend appeared in his mind. An ancient legend. Are there immortals in this world? Who passed down the ancient martial arts to this world? All things have spirits, and humans are the leaders. They collect the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and absorb the essence of the sun and moon. They can overturn mountains with a raise of their hands, and they can overturn seas with a wave of their hands. These people have a general name, immortal cultivators. Ancient martial arts, obvious strength, hidden strength, transforming strength, and grandmaster. These were just small paths for mortals. Only by stepping into the innate stage could one peek into the legendary immortal cultivators. The so-called innate stage warriors, according to the ancient records, were only at the beginning of immortal cultivation. This stage also had another name, Qi refining stage. There were 9 stages of innate stage and 9 stages of Qi refining stage. Only by breaking through to the innate stage could one be called a true immortal cultivator. However, in the current world, there was no spiritual energy in the world, and innate stage warriors were extremely rare, not to mention the existence that surpassed innate stage warriors. However, the patriarch of the Leng clan looked up at Yi Xian, who was high up in the sky. His entire soul seemed to have left his body. He already had an extremely bold guess. He was afraid that the person who wanted to destroy his Leng clan was a legendary cultivator. Run, all of you run. As long as there's one person in the Leng clan alive, quickly tell the entire ancient martial arts world that the legendary immortal cultivator has appeared. The master of the Leng clan's face was pale. He turned around and shouted at the Leng clan members. He did not have the slightest intention to resist Yi Xian, and his entire body flew down the mountain. Chapter 64. Although the disciples of the Leng family did not know what the family head meant by cultivators, the family head had already escaped. Moreover, the mysterious figure in the sky was so terrifying that no one wanted to die. Naturally, they fled in all directions like birds. Escape. Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the void and looked down at the fleeing warriors of the Leng family. A cruel smile appeared on his face. Do you think you can escape? Yi Xian said softly. Heaven swallowing a ray of 10 directions. Like a thunderclap from the 9th heaven, it was as if the stars in the sky were exploding. When Yi Xian's voice sounded, an extremely terrifying thing happened. Rumble. Blood-red light filled the sky and runes filled the air. When Yi Xian's palm and fingers struck out, this part of the world was immediately sealed. A blood-red cloud thousands of feet high formed in the sky. Within the blood-red cloud, there were countless blood-red lightning bolts crisscrossing. Kill. Crack. Endless blood-red and terrifying lightning bolts fell at this moment. The mountain was exploding and the mountains were shaking. The fleeing warriors of the Leng family were blasted into pieces by the blood-red lightning bolts. A large amount of blood mist drifted in the mountains and extremely miserable screams were heard. No. I don't want to die. What is this? He's not human, rumble. Lightning bolts flashed across the sky and the blood-red light was biting cold. The massacre continued and the living beings were screaming. Yi Xian was surrounded by a hazy blood-red light. He sat cross-legged in the sky and looked down at everything in front of him indifferently. Heaven swallowing a ray. Like a giant whale drinking water or a long river flowing backward, when Yi Xian opened and closed his eyes, it was as if there were 2 blood-red stars rotating in his eyes. Billowing blood qi surged towards Yi Xian until his body was submerged. Only then did the world calm down. Swallowing blood qi, consolidating his body, and constantly improving his cultivation. This was what Yi Xian was doing now. Half a day passed. The blood-red light around Yi Xian slowly dissipated. He spat out a mouthful of turbid air, causing an explosion in the air. When he opened his eyes, a sharp blood-red light burst out, giving people a feeling that they did not dare to look directly at him. The blood qi of hundreds of ancient martial artists has directly made up for my deficit over the past few days. The cultivation in my body has increased slightly. It seems that it's not impossible to become an immortal in the mortal world. Yi Xian muttered to himself with an indescribable expression in his eyes. At this moment, the entire Feng Ming mountain was dead silent. The huge Ling clan was also burned to the ground. Yi Xian walked slowly in the air until he landed halfway up the mountain. Looking at the broken limbs on the ground, there was not the slightest fluctuation in his eyes. Still not coming out. Suddenly, Yi Xian spoke softly and looked directly at one of the caves. Unfortunately, after Yi Xian finished speaking, there were no strange noises in the surroundings. This made Yi Xian shake his head slowly and say, "Or do you want me to find you?" "No. Don't kill me." Suddenly, a trembling voice came from within the cave. A youth dressed in the Ling clan's uniform crawled out of the cave. He looked at Yi Xian with extreme fear in his eyes. "You're still a child." Looking at the other party's young and tender face, Yi Xian's eyes were in a trance, as if he was thinking back to 4 years ago, when he was as helpless as him. If it wasn't for Yuan Ling who molded him, he wouldn't be where he was today. Don't kill me. I'm not from the Ling clan." The youth's face was pale, and his tender face was filled with fear. "What's your name?" Yi Xian asked softly. Lord, my name is Leng Wuga. I'm just a servant of the Ling clan." The youth trembled. "Yes." Yi Xian nodded and walked in front of the youth. His sparkling and translucent palm continuously stroked the youth's hair bun. His voice was as gentle as jade as he said, "You can go in peace. I will leave your corpse intact." Bang! Under the force of Yi Xian's palm, the youth's eyes lost focus. He stared at Yi Xian in front of him. He never thought that Yi Xian would really kill him. Why? The youth asked unwillingly as he was dying. "Although you hid it very well, I saw something in your eyes. And this thing is called hatred," Yi Xian said indifferently. There was a trace of sadness in his eyes. There are only 2 kinds of people who are the most terrifying in the world. The first kind are people who love the world. They set their hearts for the world and their lives for the people. They inherit the lost knowledge of the past saints and bring peace to the world. This kind of person cares about the world and benefits the people. They are also saints. The second kind are people who hate the world. They hate the world for being unfair and hate the heartless world. With hatred in their hearts, they can turn the world upside down. This kind of person is even more terrifying than the first kind. Yi Xian didn't know if he was talking to the youth or himself. At this moment, his aura was slightly lonely and bleak. "Although you are not the second kind of person, how can I let you live when you have hatred in your heart?" Yi Xian said softly. The youth's eyes had already lost focus. He turned into a cold corpse and fell to the ground. The wind was light and the clouds were clear. A light breeze blew, causing Yi Xian's hair to flutter. He looked at the vast mountains in the distance. There was endless loneliness and vicissitudes in his eyes. Yi Xian asked himself, what kind of person was he? His thoughts were in a trance. He asked himself, but he didn't get the answer he wanted. Yi Xian believed that he was a heartless person. Even though he was a weak youth, he didn't hold back and killed him on the spot. He had already abandoned his humble heart of pity. This was not the result he wanted. However, 4 years of killing had made Yi Xian understand a principle. The strong were as heavy as mountains, while the weak crawled like ants. This was a world where the strong were always strong. Only by throwing away his pity and pushing his way through could he truly be free in this world. The youth's death didn't affect Yi Xian at all. It only made him sigh. If he had spared the youth's life today, would the youth seek revenge in the future? Yi Xian wasn't afraid of the youth seeking revenge. However, the youth would have to live in hatred for the rest of his life. This kind of torment would drive a person crazy. The big shots weren't scary. The truly scary ones were these crazy little people. Perhaps at the right time, they would give you a fatal blow. Regardless of whether it was for the sake of trouble or to prevent the youth from suffering in hatred, killing him was the best way to solve the problem. Although Yi Xian's theory was extreme, this was his way of life. This was also the reason why he was able to live until now. Thinking back, Yi Xian smiled. What was wrong with him? It was as if he had turned into an old man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. He still had a long way to go. His life had just begun. Yi Xian's state of mind seemed to sublimate at this moment. He didn't fly away. Instead, he followed the mountain path and slowly walked down Phoenix Cry Mountain. However, behind Yi Xian, the mountain was stained with blood. The Leng Manor had been reduced to ruins. Countless corpses of the Leng family warriors were strewn on the ground. The scene was extremely terrifying. Chapter 65. 3 days passed, and when the news of the Leng family's destruction spread throughout the ancient martial arts world, it immediately caused a huge uproar and various speculations emerged. Some people said that the destruction of the Leng family was caused by their former enemy, while others said that the Leng family had offended a big shot that they shouldn't have offended. There were no eternal dynasties or aristocratic families. Although it was rare for an ancient martial arts family to be destroyed, there were many such examples. After all, in the martial arts world, there would naturally be grudges. Although the destruction of the Leng family caused a stir in the ancient martial arts world, it soon subsided. However, this incident caused the Azure Dragon to be extremely shocked. He never would have thought that Yi Xian would actually be so terrifying. An ancient martial family was instantly destroyed by his hands. At the same time, when the Zhuo family received the news of the destruction of the Leng family, old Master Zhuo seemed to have aged 10 years. He also became extremely anxious because he was the one who had passed the news of Yi Xian to the Leng family. However, now that the Leng family had been destroyed, he would never believe that it was not done by Yi Xian. At this moment, there was also a drastic change in the Zhuo family. Old Master Zhuo died suddenly at home overnight. After a doctor's examination, it was discovered that he had died of sudden heart failure. However, the drastic change was not over. With the sudden death of old Master Zhuo, Zhuo Junting's father also died in a car accident. The power of the entire Zhuo family fell into the hands of the second son, Zhuo Wenbin. Zhuo Junting also disappeared without a trace and was listed as a missing person by the Hanging Mirror Department. Jiangnan City. The firecrackers were set off and the fireworks were dazzling. It was the Spring Festival, the most important festival in Xia Nation. Everyone's faces were full of joy and it could be said to be extremely lively. At home in the Baiyun Pavilion, Yi Xian was having a New Year's Eve dinner with his family with a smile on his face. It was also the first time he had spent the Spring Festival with his family after returning to the mortal world. However, Yi Xian could sense that although his mother was very happy, there was a trace of regret in her eyes from time to time. Clearly, she missed Yi Ping. How could Yi Xian not see that? Yi Xian could only sigh in his heart. He didn't know if he should tell his mother about the changes in Yi Ping. Dong dong dong. All of a sudden, Yi Xian frowned when he heard a knock on the door. He didn't know who it was. At this time, everyone was celebrating the Spring Festival at home. Who would come to visit? I'll go open the door. Yi Ling put down her bowl and chopsticks and walked towards the door. As Yi Ling pushed open the door, Yi Xian and Mother Yi also looked outside. When a familiar face fell into the eyes of the three, Yi Xian's expression froze. He then silently lowered his head to eat the food in his bowl. His entire person was extremely calm. On the other hand, Mother Yi was crying tears of joy as she quickly walked towards the Yi family's main gate. Ping, you, why did you come back? Outside the door, Yi Ping was dressed in a suit and carrying a large number of goods in his hands. When he saw Mrs. Yi, a look of guilt appeared in his eyes and he murmured, "Mother." Second brother. Looking at Yi Ping in front of her, Yi Ling was also a little agitated. "Little sister," Yi Ping said with a sour nose. Come in quickly, come in quickly." "Look who he is," Mother Yi said agitatedly as she pulled Yi Ping's arm and walked towards Yi Xian. Big brother." Looking at Yi Xian calmly eating the food in his bowl without even looking at him, Yi Ping also felt a little awkward. "Xian, look, your brother is back," Mother Yi said to Yi Xian excitedly at this moment, not noticing the abnormality between the two brothers. "Oh." Yi Xian responded with a simple word. Only then did Mother Yi realize that the situation seemed to be a little strange. "You two brothers have met before?" Mother Yi seemed to have seen something and asked in a slightly suspicious voice. Sensing Mother Yi's uneasiness, Yi Xian finally looked at Yi Ping and said with a smile, "Since you're back, sit down and eat." Looking at Yi Xian's smiling face, Yi Ping could feel that there was a huge chasm between him and Yi Xian. Yi Ping also knew that if it weren't for his mother, Yi Xian probably wouldn't even look at him. Okay, sit down and eat. Tell mother, why did the Yi family let you come back?" Under Mother Yi's invitation, Yi Ping finally sat down. Yi Ling also returned to the dining table. Now that the family was gathered, Mother Yi was also very happy. At the dining table, Mother Yi kept putting food on her children's plates and asked about Yi Ping's current situation from time to time. Yi Ping's answer was also simple. He had already grown up and naturally had to come back to be filial to his mother. He even said that he wouldn't be returning to the Yi family for the time being, which made Mother Yi very happy. However, Yi Xian didn't speak at the dining table. Although Yi Ling was young, she could tell that Yi Ping's body was tense when he was chatting with her mother. From time to time, he would look at Yi Xian from the corner of his eyes, as if he was a little afraid of Yi Xian. Dinner was soon over and the family also watched the Spring Festival Gala on TV. Although this year's Spring Festival Gala was extremely boring, Mother Yi watched with great interest with her children by her side. Late at night, Mrs. Yi personally tidied up the room, and Yi Ping stayed there too. When Mrs. Yi returned to her room to rest, the two brothers sat opposite each other in the living room while Yi Ling secretly opened a crack in the door of the room and quietly observed her two brothers. Big brother. Looking at Yi Xian's calm face, Yi Ping murmured. "Don't call me big brother. When we were in the Yi family, I told you that from now on, we are no longer brothers." Yi Xian's expression was as usual and his voice was extremely calm. "Big brother, I know you resent me, but can't you forgive me?" Yi Ping asked with a pale face. Looking at his former underling, Yi Xian said softly, "I don't know what your purpose is for coming back and what mission the Yi family has given you, but I want to tell you, if you make Mother and Ling sad, don't blame me for being ruthless." "Brother, do we really not have a trace of brotherhood anymore?" Yi Ping clenched his fists and asked agitatedly. Yi Xian got up from his seat and looked down at Yi Ping condescendingly. "Do you know what it was like when I returned home? I hope you don't force me, because I will really kill you." Yi Xian suddenly turned around and walked towards his room. His ruthless voice echoed in Yi Ping's ears, making Yi Ping's heart turn cold and extremely upset. Yi Ping could completely feel that his brother was not just saying it. His cold gaze was like that of the god of the underworld, as if he would take his life in the next moment. That also made him feel uneasy and unsure of what he was thinking. In the room, Yi Ling secretly watched this scene and covered her mouth gently, almost exclaiming out loud. Yi Ling could not figure out what exactly happened to make Yi Xian say that he wanted to kill Yi Ping. Besides, it seemed that the two brothers had already met long ago and something very unpleasant must have happened. Chapter 66. Late at night. Yi Xian was alone in the house, looking at the moonlight outside the window with a straight face. He knew that Yi Ping's return must have been the Yi family's idea. However, no matter what the Yi family's agenda was, it was not something that Yi Xian was worried about. If they didn't know when to back off, Yi Xian would only have death waiting for them. Yi Xian's thoughts were simple. If Yi Ping really came back to be filial to his mother, he couldn't stop him. After all, Yi Ping was his mother's son, and as long as he followed the rules, he would still be Yi Ping's elder brother. However, if Yi Ping was ambitious, even if he was Yi Xian's biological brother, Yi Xian would be ruthless and make him disappear completely from this world. Time passed very quickly, and it had been a month since Yi Ping returned home. During this period, nothing much happened and Mrs. Yi looked radiant every day, as if she had become 10 years younger. That made Yi Xian feel a little gratified. During this period, Xia Qingzhu visited Mrs. Yi to give her a New Year's greeting while Yun Mengyao also visited several times in the name of a home visit. However, Yi Xian didn't show up when the two women visited. Clearly, he didn't want to have anything to do with the two women. During this period, strange phenomena frequently appeared all over the world. Although there were no news reports, there were various rumors on the internet. There were foreign netizens who left comments saying that they had seen 1,000-feet-long strange snake swimming in the Amazon River and even swallowing a crocodile. Although the photo posted by the netizen was extremely blurry, it was indeed a snake-like creature. There were also netizens from other countries who left comments saying that they had seen some terrifying things, but no one believed them. When these comments were gathered together, the netizens were very certain that the terrifying things they saw did exist, causing a huge uproar. There were frequent murders all over the world, but the murderer couldn't be found. Many livestock and humans died without a corpse, causing great panic in some places. Mysterious organizations of various countries showed up one after another to investigate these strange phenomena, but in the end, they didn't get the results they wanted. The cold winter passed and the spring breeze blew. In March, it was the season of spring and flowers bloomed. A patch of tender green grew from the branches and the sounds of birds chirping could be heard. Everything was slowly recovering, giving off a feeling of vitality. In the botanical garden of the Biyun Pavilion. Although there was still some coldness in the air, the various flowers and plants in the botanical garden had already shown some tender shoots, proving that the cold winter had passed and spring was coming. Yi Xian walked alone in the botanical garden until he chose an empty area before stopping. Yi Xian waved his fists and feet, causing ripples to blossom in the air. A wisp of hazy and illusory blood light slowly blossomed around his body. Phew! Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of turbid air, and a muffled sound came from the other side. Only then did Yi Xian's dancing fists and feet stop. Are you still not coming out after watching for so long? Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. Mr. Yi, please avenge me. A disheveled woman walked out from a hidden pile of grass. Her face was covered in dirt, making it impossible to see her appearance. However, her eyes were bloodshot as she excitedly looked at Yi Xian in front of her. Chua Junting. Her once graceful and luxurious temperament was no longer present on her body. Her dirty clothes and disheveled appearance proved that this woman had suffered a lot in the past few months. Why should I help you? Yi Xian asked calmly. My grandfather is dead. My father is also dead. My second uncle, Zhuo Wenbin, did all these things. If you don't help me, I don't know who else in Jiangnan City can. Chua Junting smiled sadly. But what does that have to do with me? Yi Xian shook his head slowly. His voice was emotionless. Mr. Yi, I beg of you. Bang! Zhuo Junting suddenly knelt down and kept kowtowing to Yi Xian. Her forehead hit the ground and blood flowed out. Tears gushed out of her eyes and her voice was trembling. Yi Xian spared her life at the Bohai Hotel. Later, the Zhuo family sent his information to the Leng family. Although it was old Master Zhuo's idea and had nothing to do with Zhuo Junting, Yi Xian was not merciful enough to repay evil with good. Your Zhuo family's matter has nothing to do with me. If you want revenge, it's your own business. You can leave now. Yi Xian said calmly and turned to walk home. Mr. Yi, I beg of you. Please help me. Zhuo Junting cried bitterly as she looked at Yi Xian's back. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was already far away. He was not soft-hearted at all. Zhuo Junting staggered to her feet and quickly chased after Yi Xian. However, when Yi Xian entered the house, Zhuo Junting's eyes were filled with despair. She then knelt weakly in front of Yi Xian's house and never got up again. At the same time, in the Zhuo family's villa, Zhuo Wenbin's expression was gloomy and cold as he leaned against the sofa. Opposite him was a haggard old man with a deathly pale complexion. His 10 fingers were like ghost claws, and when his eyes opened and closed, 2 ghostly flames would appear. It was an extremely terrifying sight. Elder Ghost, we've found that damned girl. She's now in front of Mr. Ye's house. What should we do? Zhuo Wenbin's face was gloomy and there was a hint of panic in his eyes. It was obvious that Yi Xian had given him a lot of pressure. This person is not simple. We can't act rashly. Elder Ghost said solemnly. But if we don't kill this girl, how can I obtain the essence blood in her body to cultivate the netherworld true scripture? Zhuo Wenbin said unwillingly. Humph. Looking at the unwillingness in Zhuo Wenbin's eyes, Elder Ghost snorted coldly. If what you said is true and this person is the one who destroyed the Leng family, I might not be his match even though I'm cultivating the Ghost Dao. But Elder Ghost, you're a Ghost Dao master. You're not a true ancient martial artist. With your unpredictable methods, can't you deal with this Yi Xian? Zhuo Wenbin said in surprise. Are you an idiot? Elder Ghost's face was gloomy as he rebuked him directly. Back then, when I used the ghost infant to devour your father's qi and blood, it was broken by this person. This Yi Xian is not simple. Without full confidence, I definitely won't go against him. When Elder Ghost said this, fear flashed through his eyes. He actually did not tell Zhuo Wenbin the truth. Back then, when his ghost infant was broken, he was heavily injured. It took him several months to recover, and this was under the condition that he had not met Yi Xian. If he went against Yi Xian head-on, he probably would not be his match. If I didn't know that your father had joined the Ling family and completely cut ties with Yi Xian, do you think I would so easily make a move and help you obtain the position of family head? Elder Ghost said unhappily. Looking at Elder Ghost's gloomy expression, Zhuo Wenbin instantly came to a realization. He said, Are we just going to let this damned girl go? Ha! Elder Ghost smiled sinisterly. A strange look flashed through his eyes. He said, You're overthinking things. You've always put this Yi Xian on the opposite side. From the way he does things, he's definitely not a good person. If we can become friends with him, it will be of great benefit to us. Moreover, this niece of yours might not be able to beg this expert. Zhuo Wenbin came to a realization. That's right. He had never offended this Mr. Yi, so why couldn't he become friends with him? Then what do you mean? Zhuo Wenbin asked carefully. Bring a great gift. We'll visit him personally. Elder Ghost's gaze was serious as he directly made a decision. Chapter 67. The spring rain continued and the temperature plummeted. Although it was already early spring, there was still a hint of coldness in the air. The drizzling rain also drenched Zhuo Junting's delicate body. Zhuo Junting had been kneeling in front of Yi Xian's house since early morning. Even though it was drizzling, she never got up. However, there was only despair in her dull eyes, making one feel pity for her. "Brother, are you really going to let her kneel like this?" Yi Ling asked with a pitiful expression. Yi Xian put his hands behind his back and looked calmly at Zhuo Junting kneeling outside the door through the window. His expression did not change at all, and no one could tell what he was thinking. She has hatred in her heart and has already fallen into paranoia. Such a person is undoubtedly crazy, especially a woman. Yi Xian said calmly. "Brother, why don't you help her?" Yi Ling bit her lips and said. Looking at Yi Ling's pitiful expression, Yi Xian smiled and said, "Silly girl, there are so many pitiful people in this world. If I help every one of them, do you think I can help them all?" At this point, Yi Xian's voice paused slightly and a strange look appeared in his eyes. He said, "Besides, this world is unfair. She wants me to help her take revenge, but what can she give me in return?" Yi Ling did not understand Yi Xian's words. She also knew that her brother was very mysterious, but she could not bear to see Zhuo Junting kneeling outside the door. In the end, Yi Ling could only sigh softly and did not speak up for Zhuo Junting. Night fell and the wind and rain stopped. When Mrs. Yi and Yi Ping returned home together, they naturally saw Zhuo Junting kneeling outside the door. Under Mrs. Ye's questioning, Yi Xian just evaded and told Mrs. Yi that he had made his own decision. At the same time, a luxurious car drove into Baiyun Pavilion and stopped in front of Yi Xian's house. Zhuo Wenbin and Elder Gui got out of the car together. When the two of them came in front of Zhuo Junting, Zhuo Wenbin sneered. "Ha! Isn't this my good niece? Why didn't you greet second uncle?" Suddenly, Zhuo Junting raised her head abruptly. Her eyes were bloodshot and filled with venomous hatred. She looked like an evil spirit that had crawled out of hell. If looks could kill, Zhuo Wenbin would have died 1,000 times over. What a strong resentment! Elder Ghost exclaimed in a low voice. He looked at Zhuo Junting with a look of delight, as if he had seen a treasure. "Zhuo Wenbin, you bastard who killed your father and brother. Even if I die and become an evil spirit, I will haunt you day and night. I will never let you rest in peace." Zhuo Junting roared like an evil spirit. Her mournful voice sent chills down people's spines. "Humph, you have a sharp tongue. Wait until I meet Mr. Yi. See how I'll kill you then," Zhuo Wenbin said viciously. Creak. The door of the Yi residence was pushed open and Yi Xian walked out slowly. This made Zhuo Wenbin and Zhuo Wenbin's expressions change. A flattering smile appeared on their faces as they quickly walked towards Yi Xian. "I've heard a lot about Mr. Yi. I hope Mr. Yi won't blame us for visiting without permission." Zhuo Wenbin bowed and lowered his posture. "Greetings, Brother Yi." Elder Ghost cupped his hands and bowed. He looked very serious. "Is there anything I can help you with?" Yi Xian asked calmly. "Mr. Yi, I'm very sorry. My niece disturbed your peace. I'm here to bring her back to the Zhuo residence. This is a small token of my appreciation. Please accept it." Zhuo Wenbin said respectfully. He even bowed and handed the 2 wooden boxes to Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian didn't take them, which made Zhuo Wenbin feel a little awkward. "Brother Yi, can we go in and have a chat?" Elder Ghost's eyes turned as he probed Yi Xian. Looking at Zhuo Wenbin and Zhuo Wenbin's eager expressions, Yi Xian's eyes flashed with a strange light. He then slowly nodded and walked directly into the house. Elder Ghost gave Zhuo Wenbin a look. The two of them were delighted and quickly walked into Yi Xian's house. At this moment, when Junting saw this scene, she bit her lips even harder. She staggered to her feet and followed him into Yi Xian's house. It was obvious that she could tell that Zhuo Wenbin wanted to rope in Yi Xian. She absolutely wouldn't allow such a thing to happen. In the living room, Yi Xian sat on the sofa and calmly looked at the three people in front of him. Mother Yi and the others knew that Yi Xian had matters to attend to, so they had returned to their rooms early. They didn't want to see these outsiders. I know that Brother Yi is an otherworldly expert. Naturally, you don't care for worldly money. These 2 boxes are 500 years old ginseng. They are also spiritual items that Wen Bin spent a lot of effort to obtain. I hope that Brother Yi will kindly accept this small gift. Elder Ghost quickly opened the 2 wooden boxes. The rich fragrance of ginseng wafted out. He directly pushed them in front of Yi Xian. The smile on his face became even more flattering, but the pain in his eyes disappeared in an instant. Yi Xian was slightly stunned as he looked at the old ginseng in the 2 wooden boxes. He could completely feel the traces of spiritual energy contained within them. He never thought that such a spiritual medicine would appear in this world at the end of the world. This was indeed rare. Yi Xian could tell that Zhuo Wenbin and Zhuo Wenbin were painstakingly trying to please him. I'll accept the gifts. Yi Xian nodded. He directly closed the wooden boxes to prevent the spiritual energy from leaking out. Although this spiritual medicine was useless to him, it was extremely effective for ordinary people. Seeing Yi Xian accept the gifts, Zhuo Wenbin's heart finally relaxed. He looked at Zhuo Junting with a trace of cold murderous intent in his eyes. Mr. Yi, no matter what orders you have in the future, as long as it is within my power, I will not refuse. Zhuo Wenbin stepped up at the right time and expressed his attitude. If there's nothing else, you can leave. Yi Xian nodded and spoke softly. Seeing that Yi Xian didn't intend to pay attention to him, Zhuo Wenbin was stunned. He wanted to say something, but before he could, Elder Ghost rolled his eyes and hurriedly pretended to be angry. He said, "Why aren't you taking your useless niece home? Are you going to disturb Mr. Ye's rest?" Huh? Zhuo Wenbin was stunned. He quickly came back to his senses and immediately understood Elder Ghost's meaning. Since Mr. Yi accepted the gifts, he clearly had no intention of protecting Zhuo Junting. Talking too much at this moment would be unnecessary. Mr. Yi, we'll take our leave. Zhuo Wenbin spoke respectfully to Yi Xian. A vicious smile appeared on his face as he looked at Zhuo Junting. He directly grabbed her arm and walked out of the Yi residence. Zhuo Junting was only a weak woman. How could she break free from Zhuo Wenbin's control? Under his constant tugging, her eyes were filled with despair. She even loudly asked for help from Yi Xian. "Mr. Yi, are you really going to leave me in the lurch?" Unfortunately, Yi Xian remained indifferent to Zhuo Junting's pleas. When the woman was dragged out of the Yi residence by Zhuo Wenbin, the 3 figures disappeared from Yi Xian's sight. If I didn't crawl out of hell, where would the bloody sea of hatred come from? Yi Xian whispered to himself. A smile appeared on his lips. The blood was hazy and the void hummed. When Yi Xian's voice fell, he mysteriously disappeared from the house. Chapter 68. Zhuo Family Villa. The servants had already been dismissed by Zhuo Wenbin. The entire villa was dimly lit. Zhuo Wenbin sat on the sofa with a glass of red wine in his hand, sipping it from time to time. His eyes were filled with excitement. An operation table, a cold scalpel, and various unknown medicines were placed in the living room. Zhuo Junting was tied up and fixed to the operation table. She was cursing at the top of her lungs. "Zhuo Wenbin, you bastard. Even if I die today and turn into a ghost, I'll eat your flesh and drink your blood." Like an evil spirit howling, like a malicious spirit howling, the current Zhuo Junting no longer had the demeanor of a virtuous lady. She seemed to have turned into a lunatic. Her crimson eyes were blooming with extremely terrifying hatred. "Little girl, you will indeed turn into a ghost. You're just a tool in my hands," Elder Ghost said excitedly. A gloomy ghost aura appeared around him. He picked up the scalpel and walked toward Zhuo Junting. Unwillingness, despair, endless anger, and hatred. These were Zhuo Junting's emotions at the moment. She was originally a rich young lady. According to the normal course of her life, she would never have to worry about food or clothing. In the future, she would find a husband, have a child, and live a peaceful and happy life. Zhuo Junting had never thought that one day, her family would be ruined and she would be killed by her second uncle. However, when the truth was placed in front of her, she finally realized that all of this was not a dream, but a reality that she had to face. Elder Ghost, you have to be careful. Don't kill her directly. Only when she's alive and releasing her heart's blood will it be useful to me. Zhuo Wenbin put down the red wine cup and quickly walked towards Elder Ghost. Even his voice was trembling. Wenbin, I really didn't misjudge you. You really are vicious and ruthless enough. Not only were you able to kill your father and older brother, you don't even have the slightest bit of humanity when facing your last family member. Elder Ghost laughed ghastly, and it was unknown if he was praising Zhuo Wenbin or ridiculing him. Zhuo Wenbin's face reddened as a look of shame flashed across his eyes. However, it was quickly replaced by madness as he said in a sinister voice, as long as I can cultivate the netherworld true insight and become a half-ghost, I'll be able to live forever and become immortal. In the future, the entire world will be mine. What's a mere family relationship worth? Good. As expected of a disciple of my ghost Tao. You have great perseverance and willpower. Elder Ghost's eyes flickered as he praised once more. My good niece, although second uncle cannot bear to kill you, for second uncle's future, I can only sacrifice you. Zhuo Wenbin gently stroked Jun Ting's cheek, as if admiring a treasure. You bastard, you will die a horrible death. At this point, Zhuo Junting knew she would die without a doubt. She gritted her teeth so hard that they were about to shatter. Her blood-red eyes bloomed with terrifying hatred, but there was nothing she could do to Zhuo Wenbin. Do it. Zhuo Wenbin said coldly. As you wish. Elder Ghost smiled sinisterly. He took the scalpel and directly cut towards Zhuo Junting's heart. Yes. A muffled groan came from Zhuo Junting's mouth. She couldn't see the scene in front of her chest, but she could feel that the sharp blade had already cut open her chest, and a large amount of liquid was spurting out from her chest. Did it hurt? Zhuo Junting could no longer feel pain. She could only feel that the cold blade was constantly stirring in her chest. Her blood was flowing out, and her consciousness was gradually blurring. The faces of her father and grandfather before their tragic deaths appeared in her mind. The operation continued, and she could no longer feel pain. Zhuo Junting's heart was now filled with monstrous unwillingness and hatred. She was unresigned. Why was she a weak woman? She was unwilling to die here before she had avenged her great enmity. Her consciousness was gradually blurring, and her eyes were gradually losing focus. At this moment, Zhuo Junting already had one foot in the door of death. It wouldn't be long before she turned into a cold corpse. The operation was very successful. The blood from her heart has been extracted. You must quickly refine it before it turns cold. Only then can you achieve a half-ghost body. Elder Ghost directly handed the container to Zhuo Wenbin. It contained the blood from Zhuo Junting's heart. Okay. Zhuo Wenbin was very excited. He took the container from Elder Ghost, raised his head, and poured the blood into his mouth. Then, he sat cross-legged and circulated the nether truth. Instantly, Zhuo Wenbin's body emitted an extremely sinister ghost qi. He entered a strange state of cultivation. At this moment, on the operating table, a large amount of blood slowly flowed out from Zhuo Junting's chest. Her body was silently twitching, and her life force was slowly dissipating. However, she kept her eyes wide open. Relying on the endless hatred in her heart, she didn't want to die like this. Time passed by quickly. 20 minutes had passed, and Zhuo Wenbin had undergone an extremely terrifying transformation. His body gradually turned into mist, and his originally human form now looked somewhat distorted. There was also an extremely dense ghostly aura lingering around him. Zhuo Wenbin suddenly opened his eyes. When his eyes opened and closed, two jade-green ghost flames were extremely frightening. It gave people an extremely terrifying feeling. Success! Zhuo Wenbin roared excitedly. He stretched his arms, and the air around him exploded. He seemed to have an illusion. At this moment, even if a mountain blocked in front of him, he would be able to shatter it into pieces with a single punch. Elder Ghost, in order to thank you for your kindness in nurturing me, Wenbin has nothing to repay you. I can only treat you as blood food and have a meal first. Zhuo Wenbin woke up from his excitement. His voice became even colder, and there was a hint of killing intent in his eyes as he looked at Elder Ghost. You want to kill me? Facing Zhuo Wenbin, who was half human and half ghost, Elder Ghost sneered. It was as if he held the pearl of wisdom in his hands and did not put Zhuo Wenbin in his eyes at all. This is what you taught me. If I want to achieve great things, then I cannot have the slightest bit of mercy. Zhuo Wenbin laughed evilly. Ding ling ling. Ah! Suddenly, a golden bell appeared in Elder Ghost's hand. It was slowly swinging, causing Zhuo Wenbin to howl in pain and fall to the ground. Wenbin, you're still too inexperienced. If I did not have the means to keep you in check, how would I dare to teach you the nether truth? Elder Ghost said with disdain. Elder Ghost, I was wrong. Please spare me. Zhuo Wenbin howled in pain as he kept begging. Humph. I'll let you go this time. If you have any thoughts of betraying me in the future, I'll definitely teach you a lesson. Elder Ghost put away the golden bell and said with an extremely cold voice. Go. Your niece is not completely dead yet. Consume her flesh and blood to stabilize your unstable half-ghost body. Elder Ghost laughed evilly and pointed at Junting, who was lying on the operating table. Food? What delicious blood food! Zhuo Wenbin slowly got up. His eyes were like copper bells. Large amounts of saliva flowed out from the corner of his mouth as he walked toward Junting. At this moment, Junting's consciousness was blurred. Her body was emitting an aura of death. If it were not for the hatred in her heart, she would have died long ago. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I haven't had my revenge. Revenge. Junting's voice was as soft as a mosquito. However, the hatred that could not be washed away by the rivers and the four seas filled the entire Junting villa. Do you hate? Are you angry? Are you unwilling? All of a sudden, a strange voice sounded in Zhuo Junting's mind. Zhuo Junting couldn't tell where the voice came from, but her heart was telling her that only this person could save her. I want to kill him. I want to kill everyone. Give me strength. Please give me strength. Junting screamed in her heart. Monstrous hatred filled the air. This world is very unfair. Some people are born to be emperors and nobles, controlling the fate of others. Some people are born poor and waste their lives. But today, I'll give you a fair chance. Give me your soul. From now on, you'll be my blade. Wherever my blade points, you'll break all obstacles for me. Are you willing? Like the temptation of the devil, like the guidance of the god of the underworld. When the strange voice sounded again, Junting trembled. Her blood-red eyes bloomed with a madness that had never been seen before. I'm willing. I'm willing. As long as you give me endless power, I'll give you my soul. I'll be your blade forever. Even if I have to kill everyone in the world, I'll have no regrets. Junting answered in a shrill voice. She had already sunk into madness. Good. Heaven and earth can be my witness. Today, in the name of the immortal heavenly Lord, I'll give you the blood-soul body. You'll fall into the mortal world forever. Contract. In the Zhuo family villa. Yi Xian's majestic voice seemed to have transcended time and space. A blood-red contract word formed in the void and rushed into Junting's body. Chapter 69. Ah! Like the howl of a malicious spirit, like the wail of a vengeful spirit, Zhuo Wenbin let out a ferocious roar. The bloody hole in her chest healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Zhuo Wenbin, who was originally pouncing towards her, was sent flying by the blossoming blood light. Whine! Space surged as ripples spread out. Yi Xian's sudden appearance caused the spectral elder's face to change drastically. He took a few steps back as panic appeared in his eyes. Kill! Zhuo Junting's eyes were blood-red and her face was extremely ferocious. She took a step forward and instantly appeared in front of Zhuo Wenbin. She stretched out her hands and 10 blood-red nails extended, tearing Zhuo Wenbin into pieces. What is this thing? Looking at Jun Ting's terrifying appearance, Elder Ghost cried out in shock. My dear niece, I've already become a half-ghost, an undying existence. You can't kill me. Ghostly shadows flickered and Yin Qi regenerated. Zhuo Wenbin's body condensed. Apparently, Zhuo Wenbin's attack did not harm him at all. Blood Soul Technique. The bloody light was chaotic, and a vicious aura was overflowing. A pile of extremely mysterious scriptures suddenly appeared in Zhuo Junting's mind. Although she couldn't understand them, she seemed to have a feeling that she had to use a method to truly kill Zhuo Wenbin. This made her roar directly, and her whole body turned into a bloody light, and instantly swallowed Zhuo Wenbin. Ah! Zhuo Wenbin let out a mournful howl as the ghostly qi melted away. In this terrifying bloody light, Zhuo Wenbin was horrified to discover that the half-ghostly body he had just condensed was rapidly dissipating. This shocking change made him feel the fear of death. I'm immortal. Ghost. Ghost Elder, save me, Zhuo Wenbin howled miserably. His voice grew weaker and weaker as he was completely devoured by the bloody light. Not even a bit of his body was left. Bang! The bloody light faded and Zhuo Junting's body appeared. However, her face was extremely pale and she was panting weakly. However, her eyes were filled with indescribable hatred. No, impossible, impossible, he's a half-ghost, an immortal existence. How could he be killed by someone? Elder Ghost's voice trembled as if he couldn't believe what he had just seen. Immortal? Disdain flashed through Yi Xian's eyes as he calmly said, not to mention a mere half-ghost body, even the legendary immortal gods wouldn't dare to say that they are immortal and indestructible. You mortals are really stupid. As Yi Xian's voice entered his ears, Elder Ghost suddenly woke up. He abruptly looked at Yi Xian and continuously retreated. His eyes revealed extreme fear as he said, You. Who exactly are you? Yi Xian was an ancient martial artist. Yi Xian was a martial artist. But Yi Xian was a martial artist. That was ancient martial artist. Yi ancient. Martial artist ancient. Was martial artist. Ancient martial artist. Ancient martial. At this moment, Yi Xian was very calm. However, the aura he exuded was extremely heavy. It was like a mountain pressing down on Elder Ghost's heart. I'll give you 2 choices. 1 is to kill yourself here. 2 is to be killed by me, Yi Xian said in a low voice. The mountain-like pressure and the feeling of death. Elder Ghost had lived for dozens of years. His eyes were extremely sharp. How could he not see that Yi Xian wasn't just joking? He really wanted to kill him. Mr. Yi, as the saying goes, leave a way out for yourself. Although I don't know who you are, I'm a disciple of Dragon Tiger Mountain. If I die in your hands today, Dragon Tiger Mountain won't let you go in the future, Elder Ghost said while pretending to be fierce. Kill him. Yi Xian said softly. He didn't say anything else. Zhuo Junting laughed ferociously. She turned into a bloody shadow again and tried to devour Yi Xian. Soul destruction curse. Yi Xian turned hostile immediately. Elder Ghost's expression changed. He quickly formed a spell. Rays of dark light bloomed from his hand. He slammed them at Chua Junting. Ugh! The dark light entered her body. Chua Junting staggered. The bloody light around her became slightly illusory. Clearly, Chua Junting was injured by Elder Ghost's spell. Interesting. Seeing the spell in Elder Ghost's hand, Yi Xian's eyes lit up. He looked playful. If Yi Xian wasn't wrong, Elder Ghost was using a Ghost Dao spell. However, it was a low-level spell. Yi Xian didn't think much of it. What truly surprised Yi Xian was that even though it was an unorthodox technique, it still required spiritual energy to activate. This was also a symbol of stepping into the realm of cultivators. However, Yi Xian didn't feel the slightest bit of spiritual energy from Elder Gui's body. Yet, this person was still able to use ghost techniques without the support of spiritual energy. This was indeed strange to Yi Xian. Back off. Chua Junting glared at Elder Ghost viciously after Yi Xian called for her. She didn't attack him anymore. However, this wasn't what Elder Ghost wanted to see. He would rather fight Chua Junting than face Yi Xian. As an abandoned disciple of Longhu Mountain, although his cultivation wasn't high, his senses were very sharp. If Yi Xian attacked, he wouldn't be able to escape. Mr. Yi, don't force me. Seeing Yi Xian slowly walk towards him, Elder Ghost kept backing away. A golden bell appeared in his hand as a desperate look appeared in his eyes. Boom! Yi Xian took a step forward, causing the air to explode. Under Elder Ghost's astonished gaze, Yi Xian had already appeared before him. Without waiting for him to shake the golden bell, Yi Xian's jade-like palm had already pressed down on his head. Let me see why you can use a Ghost Dao spell without any spirit qi in your body. Soul Search. Yi Xian enunciated each word clearly. His eyes shone with a strange blood-red light, which immediately made Elder Ghost's eyes glaze over. It was as if he had lost his soul and turned into a walking corpse. After a full 10 minutes, when the bloody light in Yi Xian's eyes dissipated and he removed his palm from Elder Ghost's head, he saw Elder Ghost fall to the ground like a pile of mud. His scattered eyes proved that Elder Ghost was dead to the point where he couldn't be any more dead. Elder Ghost's death didn't affect Yi Xian in the slightest. Only a hint of admiration appeared in his eyes. As its name implied, soul-searching was an extremely vicious secret technique. Not only was it capable of reading Elder Ghost's memories, once this technique was executed, Elder Ghost's soul would be obliterated without a trace, and he wouldn't even have the chance to reincarnate. From Elder Ghost's memories, Yi Xian finally understood why he could use a Ghost Dao spell even though he wasn't an immortal cultivator. Longhu Mountain was a holy land of Taoism. In the distant past, immortal cultivators truly existed. Elder Ghost's real name was Lu Qi. Elder Ghost was just his alias. He was originally a disciple of Longhu Mountain. He was hunted down by Longhu Mountain for stealing the Nether Truth, so he hid in Jiangnan City. But that wasn't the point. Chapter 70. Most importantly, in the distant past, when the age of Dharma arrived, the once sacred land of Taoism, Mount Longhu, was unable to rise again. It was not just Mount Longhu, other places of cultivation were the same. These cultivators hid themselves from the world, hoping to find another way to cultivate. It had to be said that man was the leader of all living things, and his wisdom was as vast as the sea. In the age of Dharma, a cultivation prodigy appeared in Mount Longhu. He cultivated both Taoism and martial arts, and even learned from ancient martial arts, allowing him to walk on a strange path of cultivation. The blood-qi transfer technique. The human body was a miniature universe with countless mysteries. This cultivation prodigy combined ancient martial arts and cultivation. He kept digging out his own blood and qi, using his own blood and qi as a medium. Finally, he was able to perform some simple spells. This should have been a joyous occasion, and could have allowed cultivators to reappear in the world. However, after 10 years, not only was this cultivation prodigy unable to break through the 9th layer of qi refining to become a cultivator, but he was buried in the earth instead. After the verification of the later generations, they helplessly discovered a fact. Although this cultivation genius could use some simple techniques, every time he used a bit of his blood qi, his lifespan would decrease by a bit. This was not a cultivation method at all, but a method to take one's life. Even so, the blood and qi conveyance technique left behind by this prodigy was regarded as a treasure by the Taoists. After all, in the age of Dharma decline, it was already very impressive to be able to cast spells. There was no hope for immortality, no path of cultivation, but having techniques was better than being immortal. The spectral elder looked to be in his 70s or 80s, but he was only in his early 30s. It was only because he constantly used ghost techniques that his blood qi gradually depleted, making him look like an old man in his twilight years. When Yi Xian thought of this, he suddenly discovered an extremely terrifying secret. Up until now, he had been constantly devouring blood qi to reach his current level of cultivation, so he did not need much spiritual qi. Wasn't the blood and qi transportation method created by this Taoist prodigy similar to his cultivation method of devouring blood and qi through different means? The only difference between the two was that Yi Xian had devoured blood qi to increase his cultivation, so his own blood qi was extremely terrifying. On the other hand, this Taoist genius had been constantly consuming his own blood qi, which was why he had lost his life. This was also the fundamental difference between the two. Yi Xian suddenly had a horrifying thought. The blood-soul mutant beasts lurked in the human world, constantly devouring flesh and blood essence to gradually restore their cultivation. Humans would eventually become their prey, and the world would definitely be in chaos in the future. If these Taoist cultivators were to obtain the blood qi devouring technique from these blood souls and combine it with the blood qi transferring technique created by this Taoist genius, wouldn't they be able to recreate the world of immortal cultivators? When this thought appeared in his mind, Yi Xian was in a trance. It was as if he saw a whole new world unfold before him. However, after thinking about it for a while, he smiled. Even if these cultivators obtained the method to devour blood and qi, they didn't have any cultivation methods to cultivate at all. At most, they could only break through the 9th stage of qi refining and enter the foundation establishment stage. Although their lifespan could be as high as 300 years, they would still die in the end. Unless, if Yi Xian passed down the immortal cultivation method to this world, then there would be a real immortal cultivator like him in this world. However, an extremely cruel scene also appeared in Yi Xian's mind. In the future world, there would be slaughter everywhere. Everyone would hunt others for their own cultivation. This world would be broken and completely turned into a hell. As a great cultivator at the tribulation passing stage, Yi Xian was only one step away from becoming an immortal. He was deeply aware of how rugged the path of immortal cultivation was. Talent, temperament, perseverance, and opportunity were all indispensable. Qi refining, foundation establishment, golden core, nascent soul, astral projection, spirit severing, fusion, tribulation passing, and immortal ascension. There were a total of 9 realms. Each realm was like a natural chasm. One wrong step would lead to the destruction of one's soul. Not to mention that people in this world could devour blood and qi to begin immortal cultivation, even in the earth immortal world where spiritual qi filled the sky, wanting to become an immortal was 1 in a billion. Yi Xian wasn't worried about the appearance of immortal cultivators like him in this world. As long as they were his enemies, he could destroy them with his palm. Even if a true immortal descended, he still had his own trump card to deal with it. However, if this secret was revealed to the world and the world developed in this direction, the peaceful days he wanted would be gone. After hearing what he heard today, Yi Xian's mood was extremely complicated. He was sure that this path would work. He could also let Mother Yi and his younger sister step into the ranks of immortal cultivation. However, this way, disputes would arise everywhere in the world. Even his family would have to step into this quagmire and begin to fight against the heavens. Immortal cultivators cultivated their fate and went against the heavens. The master was only a guide who gave you the correct guidance on cultivation. The future path was to be walked by yourself. Yi Xian understood that if his family became immortal cultivators, he couldn't protect them forever. He also had his own path to walk, and this path was more difficult than other immortal cultivators. Dispelling his troubled thoughts, he temporarily put this matter aside in Yi Xian's heart. However, Yi Xian also understood that the blood-soul beasts were lurking in the human world. When they gradually appeared in the eyes of the world would change sooner or later. Master. A voice entered Yi Xian's ears and pulled him back from his thoughts. I don't like the title, Master. You should just call me Mr. Yi, said Yi Xian calmly. Yes, Mr. Yi. Zhuo Junting's body was covered in blood, and a vicious aura was growing around her. Her attitude was very humble, and her eyes were filled with the color of death. It was as if there was nothing in the world that made her reluctant to part with it. Looking at the woman in front of him, Yi Xian helplessly shook his head. She used to be a rich young lady who could have lived a peaceful life as a mortal, but in the end, because of hatred, she walked on a path of no return. Yi Xian admitted that he wasn't a kind person. He even used some tricks to turn Zhuo Junting into what she was now. However, Yi Xian still believed that there was no such thing as love for no reason in this world, much less hatred for no reason. He didn't owe her anything, and only by paying her would he be able to bestow her with power that surpassed mortals. The former Zhuo Junting is already dead. Now that you've become a blood soul, you're most sensitive to blood qi. You should use the Zhuo clan as a foundation to develop your own forces. Help me find the blood souls and blood soul beasts lurking around the world, said Yi Xian softly. Yes, Master. Zhuo Junting bowed. There was no sign of disobedience in her eyes. Everything was done. Yi Xian took a deep look at Zhuo Junting. When he took a step out, he disappeared from the Zhuo clan's villa. Chapter 71. The sun rose from the east and sunlight shone down from the sky. Yi Xian faced the sun and breathed in and out. His mouth and nose occasionally inhaled and exhaled boundless blood energy. His clothes fluttered without any wind, and ripples bloomed in the air. Ding-ling-ling. The sound of a phone ringing caused Yi Xian to slowly open his eyes and wake up from his cultivation. He casually picked up the phone and Azure Dragon's laughter came from the other end. Mr. Yi, I didn't disturb your rest, did I? As the saying goes, one does not visit a temple for no reason. Yi Xian understood in his heart that the Azure Dragon had called early in the morning was obviously not to greet him. What is it? Yi Xian said in a serious voice. Yi Xian's attitude was very direct, causing the Azure Dragon to smile obsequiously on the phone and directly start talking about serious matters. After a full 10 minutes, Yi Xian slowly nodded and said, "All right, I understand. Mr. Yi, I'll send someone to pick you up tomorrow." After receiving a reply from Yi Xian, the Azure Dragon's voice was very excited, and then he hung up the phone. The matter was very simple. The Martial Security Department was going to hold an annual meeting, and the Azure Dragon's call to Yi Xian was to invite Yi Xian. As a guest elder of the Earth Group, Yi Xian naturally would not reject the Azure Dragon's request. After all, the Azure Dragon had helped him a lot with the things he had done. As for the so-called annual meeting, it was actually a martial arts competition. The rankings of the 8 groups were also divided according to the annual martial arts competition. The higher the ranking, the more resources they would receive. However, what Yi Xian did not know was that in the past 10 years, the Earth Group could not be said to be at the bottom, but it was not far off. In last year's martial arts competition, they were ranked second to last. As the leader of the Earth group, how could the Azure Dragon feel good? However, the Azure Dragon was extremely excited about this year's martial arts competition. As long as Yi Xian was willing to participate in this year's annual meeting, the other 7 groups would definitely have a whole new level of respect for them. Yi Xian was a guest delegate of the Earth group, so he naturally would not compete with the members of the other groups. However, the 8 groups of guest delegates would have a simple spar. Although it looked like they were making friends through martial arts, it was actually to show off the strength of the guest delegates of each group. After all, the 8 groups of guest elders only listened to orders and did not listen to orders. They also had great authority. This could be considered a different kind of selection. Of course, Yi Xian didn't know about this, and Azure Dragon didn't tell him either. The Azure Dragon would not tell Yi Xian that every year in the martial arts competition, the Earth group would always be at the bottom. If you did not come this year, the Earth group would definitely lose all their face. Azure Dragon would never say such embarrassing words even if he was beaten to death. All he could do was to invite Yi Xian to the headquarters of the Wuxia department in a roundabout way and explain the matter in a subtle way. At this moment, Yi Xian hung up the phone as an idea popped up in his mind. Azure Dragon and the others all knew that he was in Jiangnan City, and yesterday, Zhuo Junting had personally come to look for him. However, he lived with his family, and sooner or later, his family would find out. This also gave Yi Xian the idea of going out to live alone, which would also avoid some unnecessary trouble. As for the safety of his family, Yi Xian was not worried at all. After all, he had refined 2 jade sword pendants and a great formation to protect them. Even a pre-celestial stage martial artist would not be able to endanger their safety. With a decision in his heart, Yi Xian picked up the phone again and called Zhuo Junting, instructing her to help him find a house. Zhuo Junting was very efficient. In less than an hour, someone came to the Yi Xian's house and handed a bunch of keys to the door to the Yi Xian. When Mrs. Yi and the others saw this scene, although they were reluctant to let Yi Xian go out to live alone, Mrs. Yi also understood that her son was very mysterious, and there were some things that he did not want her to know. Hence, Mrs. Yi did not ask the reason why Yi Xian was living alone. Yi Xian could also see the reluctance in Mrs. Ye's eyes. He said that he would go to capital city for a period of time and that he would accompany her when he returned to Jiangnan. The next day, when a helicopter flew over from the sky and landed directly on the lawn of the Yi family home, Yi Xian boarded the helicopter and flew directly in the direction of capital city under the watchful eyes of Mrs. Yi and the others. Watching the helicopter gradually disappear into the distance, a complicated look appeared in his eyes, but he still took out his mobile phone and secretly sent a message. Some people also found out that Yi Xian had gone to capital city again. The sky was blue and clear for thousands of miles. Tai Li piloted the helicopter and rushed towards capital city. The little girl's face was pale and her eyes were full of nervousness. From time to time, she would size up Yi Xian from the corner of her eyes. "What are you looking at?" All of a sudden, Yi Xian opened his eyes and looked at Ling Long. "Ah!" Ling Long exclaimed and her face turned red. She immediately lowered her head and looked even more nervous. Looking at the little girl's blushing face beside him, Yi Xian smiled and asked, "Are you very afraid of me?" "No. No. Why would I be afraid of you?" Ling Long's voice trembled slightly, but her tone had already betrayed her inner thoughts. Clearly, the little girl still remembered how Yi Xian almost killed her with his own hands back then. "You're a very cute little girl. Unfortunately, you'll never grow up." Yi Xian sighed and stroked Ling Long's hair gently, not caring about whether she was willing or not. Buzz. After Yi Xian said that, Tai Li, who was piloting the helicopter, suddenly shook his hands. The flight that was originally stable suddenly became bumpy. Clearly, Tai Li was greatly affected. "Fly steadily," Yi Xian said with a slight frown. Okay, okay. Tai Li said with a flushed face. At this moment, Ling Long's eyes were dull. She could completely feel the warmth of Yi Xian's palm and knew that Yi Xian's action was too intimate. If it were any other time, she would have pushed away Yi Xian's palm and given Yi Xian a cold look. However, Ling Long did not do so. It was not because she was afraid of Yi Xian, but because of Yi Xian's words. Will I really never grow up? Ling Long murmured to herself, her face full of bitterness. Your primordial spirit was born strong, causing the physical body and primordial spirit to be uncoordinated. This hinders the growth of the physical body. Yi Xian saw the crux of Ling Long's problem at a glance and said bluntly. Primordial spirit? What's a primordial spirit? Ling Long seemed to have forgotten how terrifying Yi Xian was. When it came to her own matters, she quickly asked. That's right. How would you know what a primordial spirit is? Yi Xian laughed at himself and continued, you might not understand primordial spirit, but it's actually the so-called spiritual force. You can also call it the soul. The physical body is like a raft in the water. The soul is the thing that controls the raft. Neither of these two can be missing. They are also the foundation of all living things. At this point, Yi Xian looked at Ling Long with a strange look in his eyes. He continued, and you were born with a strong soul. Your body can't bear your soul. This is also the reason why you can't grow up. Mr. Yi. Since you can see Ling Long's problem, then do you have a solution? Tai Li's voice trembled, proving that he was extremely emotional. Chapter 72. Away. Yi Xian shook his head slowly and chuckled. This little girl's soul is getting stronger by the day. Her body will collapse sooner or later. In less than a year, I'm afraid her body will explode and she will die. Grandpa Poison said the same thing. Looks like I won't live past 18. Exquisite smiled sadly. There was a hint of bitterness in her eyes. So it turned out that Ling Long wasn't a little girl. When Yi Xian first saw Ling Long, he'd already noticed it. Mr. Yi. Tai Li begs you. Since you can see the crux of Exquisite's illness. Why you must have a way to save her. Tai Li quickly pressed the autopilot button and left the cockpit. He knelt in front of Yi Xian. His eyes were filled with desperation. I do have a way to save her, but why should I help her? What price can you pay? Yi Xian said calmly. Exquisite and Tai Li were overjoyed when they heard the first half of Yi Xian's words. However, when Yi Xian finished his second half, they were stunned. They did not know how to answer Yi Xian. Mr. Yi, as long as you can save Exquisite, my life will be yours from now on, Tai Li said with a flushed face. You're so rough and your cultivation is weak. Other than brute force, what use do I have for you? Yi Xian smiled. Tai Li's face turned red as he looked at Yi Xian's smiling face. Anger rose in his heart. If it were not for the fact that he was no match for Yi Xian, he would have punched Yi Xian in the face. He would have let Yi Xian know why flowers were so red. Mr. Yi, if you have any conditions, just tell me. Although Exquisite's body could not grow up, she was not really a little girl. Her intelligence was much higher than Tai Li's. Since Yi Xian proposed this, he must have his reasons. You're very smart, Yi Xian praised with a smile. It's actually very simple. I can cure your illness, but in exchange, you have to work for me for 10 years. During these 10 years, no matter what I want you to do, you can't disobey. Yi Xian's smile disappeared as he looked at Exquisite with a serious expression. When Yi Xian proposed this condition, Tai Li's expression changed greatly before Ling Long could reply. He immediately refuted, that's impossible. Your nature is cruel and murderous. If you let Ling Long stay by your side for 10 years, wouldn't she also become a murderous maniac? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes as a cold light flashed through them. An extremely terrifying murderous aura pressed down on Tai Li like a mountain, causing him to wake up. Only then did he realize that he had said something he shouldn't have. However, the words had already left his mouth, and Tai Li had no way to take them back. He could only continue to say, "If you want to kill me, then kill me. If I frown, then I'm not a good man." Ha! Looking at Tai Li's unyielding expression, Yi Xian's lips curled into a cold smile. He said, "You really think I don't dare to kill you?" A misty bloody light bloomed slightly, and the temperature in the cockpit suddenly dropped. It was as if something extremely terrifying was going to happen in the next moment. "Mr. Yi, I agree." Suddenly, before Yi Xian could make a move, Ling Long's voice rang out. "Ling Long, are you crazy? He's a murderous maniac. Why are you so stupid?" Tai Li shouted anxiously. Looking at Tai Li's agitated expression, Ling Long smiled bitterly and said, "Can't you see? Regardless of whether I agree or not, Mr. Yi won't let me go. Moreover, if he kills you, how can I bear it?" Ha! Yi Xian laughed out loud. He looked at Ling Long with even more admiration, and the murderous intent around him disappeared. In fact, everything Yi Xian did was to force Ling Long to agree. After all, Yi Xian admitted that he was not a saint. It could be said that he was a person who would not do anything without benefits. If he could not get any benefits, why would he bring up the hidden dangers in Ling Long's body? Since the matter was settled, the murderous intent toward Tai Li naturally disappeared. In fact, Yi Xian was just putting on an act. His real goal was still the little girl. Ling Long, you're very smart. This also proves that I didn't misjudge you. When we get to the Wu Pen department, I have my ways. All of a sudden. Before Yi Xian could finish, his voice suddenly stopped. When he opened and closed his eyes, an extremely terrifying bloody light flashed across his eyes. He even looked into the distant sky through the window. Tai Li, find a place to land immediately. Yi Xian's sinister voice made Ling Long and Tai Li feel a chill in their hearts. They had no idea what had happened to Yi Xian. "Yi Xian, what are you up to now?" Tai Li said angrily. "Up to now? Don't you have a radar on the helicopter, you idiot?" Yi Xian's voice was low. His eyes were overflowing with murderous intent. He had already guessed something that he did not want to accept. "Big brother Tai, quickly do as Mr. Yi said and land the helicopter in a safe area." Ling Long followed Yi Xian's gaze and looked into the distant sky. Her little face instantly turned pale. Her spiritual power was strong to begin with, so she naturally saw an extremely terrifying scene. "It's too late." Yi Xian stood up from his seat. The bloody light around his body slowly bloomed. The bloodthirsty demon sword quietly appeared in his hand, and the cabin door was kicked open by him. Viroom. In the distant sky, a missile with a terrifying trail of fire trailing behind it was making a terrifying roar. It surged toward the helicopter Yi Xian was in. Damn it! How is this possible? When this scene appeared before Tai Li's eyes, his face immediately turned pale. His body was trembling, and he kept growling. This is the H-3 satellite positioning missile. Although it's not very powerful, it's more than enough to blow up the helicopter we're in. Ling Long calmly analyzed, but there was a trace of trembling in her voice. There was also a hint of despair mixed in it. "Parachutes, quickly get the parachutes." Tai Li said anxiously, but his heart was also filled with despair. It was too fast, too fast. Tai Li knew that even if he took out the parachutes now, the missile would blow them into ashes before they could leave the helicopter. In just a short 5 seconds, the missile tore through the sky. The sound of it piercing through the air was ear-splitting. Tai Li and Ling Long closed their eyes in despair and could only wait for death to come. Boom! The missile finally came, but Ling Long and Tai Li did not see it. Yi Xian's face was cold. When he slashed out with his sword, a monstrous sword light burst out and instantly cut the missile in half. Then, a violent explosion occurred. However, the aftershock of the explosion instantly knocked Ling Long and Tai Li unconscious. The helicopter they were in also began to fall to the ground because of the aftershock of the explosion. Virum. The bloody light soared and crossed the sky. The void was extremely turbulent and rippled. Yi Xian's face was extremely gloomy. When he waved his hand, he directly froze Ling Long and Tai Li in the air. Under the bloody light, the three of them also descended to the ground. Chapter 73. Ha! Where am I? Are we dead? In the middle of a desolate field, Ling Long groggily opened her eyes and murmured. The glaring sunlight stung her eyes until she saw the unconscious Tai Li beside her. Only then did she wake up. I'm not dead. Ling Long exclaimed in surprise. Your life is mine. How can you die without my permission? Yi Xian said with his hands behind his back. Mr. Yi. Did you save me? When she saw Yi Xian, Ling Long had the urge to cry. Her eyes were filled with a large amount of mist. She finally confirmed that she wasn't dead and was still alive. Take back your tears and wake this idiot up. We'll head to the capital right now. Yi Xian frowned as he reprimanded in a slightly reprimanding voice. Brother Tai, wake up. Ling Long hurriedly wiped away the tears in her eyes and shook Tai Li's body. At this moment, Yi Xian was alone in the field. A breeze blew, causing his hair to flutter. He looked at the wreckage of the helicopter in the distance with a gloomy look in his eyes. He had just left Jiangnan City. Apart from Qin Long, only his family knew about it. Qin Long could not have leaked the news. Moreover, Mrs. Yi and his sister did not have much contact with the outside world. Besides, he left in a hurry. Even if someone wanted to find out about him, it would definitely not be so fast. Yi Ping. Yi Xian said in a low voice. He did not have to think to guess that the only person who leaked the news was this underling who had just returned home. Yi Ping had a close relationship with the Yi family. Besides, only the 8 major families in capital city had the power to send missiles to kill him in Xia Nation. However, there was one thing that Yi Xian could not figure out. If this was really done by the Yi family, weren't they a little too stupid? Several big shots of Xia Nation knew that Yi Xian had a huge feud with the Yi family. If he was really killed by the missiles, the Yi family would be the first suspect. Even if the Yi family was one of the 8 great aristocratic families in the capital, this kind of thing had already crossed the bottom line of the Xia kingdom. The Xia kingdom, this colossus, would be even more furious. They would definitely destroy the Yi family and would not show any mercy. Yi Xian thought about it for a long time, but he still couldn't figure out the crux of the matter. However, there was one thing that Yi Xian was very clear about, and that was that Yi Ping must have been the one who betrayed him. Little brother, you really want to force me to kill you? Yi Xian slowly breathed in, the blood in his eyes flashing. Yi. Mr. Yi. Tai Li's face was filled with excitement. The two of them were walking towards Yi Xian, which woke Yi Xian up from his thoughts. I've already informed Lord Azure Dragon. Someone is already coming to receive us. Ling Long came to Yi Xian's side and quickly said. Yi. Mr. Yi. Thank you. Tai Li was at a loss. Although he didn't know how Yi Xian saved him and Ling Long, the fact that the two of them could survive was definitely because of Yi Xian. The Martial Security Department was indeed very efficient. In less than half an hour, several military jeeps had already found Yi Xian. A few officers even alighted from the jeeps and saluted Yi Xian to show their identities. After getting into the jeep, Yi Xian and the others drove in the direction of capital city. A large number of soldiers were left behind to guard the scene behind the wreckage of the helicopter. In the car, Yi Xian seemed to be resting with his eyes closed, but the murderous aura around him inadvertently made Ling Long and Tai Li feel like they were sitting on pins and needles. Ling Long, tell Azure Dragon not to make this matter public for the time being, lest we alert him. I'll make a decision when I reach capital city. Yi Xian opened his eyes and said in a calmer voice. Huh. Okay. Ling Long hurriedly agreed, then dialed Azure Dragon's number and passed on Yi Xian's instructions. Mr. Yi, Lord Azure Dragon wants to talk to you, Ling Long said. No need. I'll talk to him in detail when I reach capital city. Yi Xian closed his eyes again. He had no intention of talking to Azure Dragon. At the same time, capital city, Marshal Security Department's Earth Group office. The table in front of Azure Dragon was smashed into pieces. His expression was extremely ugly. He paced back and forth in the room, his body occasionally emitting an extremely cold aura. How dare you use an H-2 satellite missile? No matter who you are, Lao Tzu will definitely make you pay a painful price. Azure Dragon roared in a low voice. He was already extremely furious. After more than 10 minutes, Azure Dragon picked up the phone again and directly called the Grand Marshal of China, Li Lingguo. Obviously, this matter had already risen to the national level and was definitely not Yi Xian's personal matter. Elderly, yes, that's the situation. Alright, I understand. An hour later, Azure Dragon hung up the phone and his expression became slightly better. However, he also understood that a huge earthquake was about to happen in China, because he could tell from Li Lingguo's voice how angry the other party was. Capital City. The military jeep was driving on the road, heading in the direction of the Earth Group office. This was the scene that Yi Xian saw when he got off the car. Mr. Yi, I've frightened you. Azure Dragon, dressed in a military uniform, strode towards Yi Xian. The members of the Earth Group followed closely behind him, greeting Yi Xian one after another. Looking at Azure Dragon's guilty face, Yi Xian patted his shoulder and said with a smile, "It's just a small matter. There's no need to mobilize so many people. Let's go in and talk." Azure Dragon had thought that Yi Xian would be in a bad mood after encountering this matter, and might even denounce him. However, there was a huge discrepancy between his imagination and reality. Yi Xian did not show any signs of anger, which made Azure Dragon feel even more ashamed. In the Earth Group's meeting room, Azure Dragon sat at the head of the table, Yi Xian sat to the side, Tai Li and Ling Long stood to the side, and the rest of the members of the Earth Group had been dispersed by Azure Dragon long ago. Mr. Yi, don't worry. I will definitely give you an explanation for this matter. Azure Dragon said sincerely. Are there any clues? Yi Xian was sure that on his way to the capital, Azure Dragon had already sent people to investigate this matter. H-2 satellite positioning missile. Although this weapon is not very powerful and is only a probing missile, this kind of thing is definitely not available to private individuals. This is also a taboo in China. Azure Dragon slowly explained, his face slightly gloomy as he continued, after our investigations, there is not a single H-2 missile missing from the arsenals all over the country. You mean to say that this missile is privately owned? Yi Xian said with an unfathomable gaze. Mr. Ye's words make sense, but the possibility is not high. In terms of national defense and security, China is second to none in the world, and will never allow private individuals to possess such a restricted weapon. Azure Dragon said with certainty. Just because it's not allowed doesn't mean it's not allowed. You don't have to worry about this matter. I will naturally find out who did it. Yi Xian tapped his fingers on Zhui Yan's face, his voice becoming calmer and calmer. Chapter 74. Yi Xian told Azure Dragon a few things. The first thing was that the news of his arrival in the capital could be released directly and let the person who wanted to kill him know. Perhaps there would be some unexpected gains. The second thing was that Yi Xian asked Azure Dragon to find a residence for him. He was going to stay in the capital for a long time, so Azure Dragon nodded and agreed. As for the third thing, it was to ask for people. From then on, Ling Long would no longer be a member of the Earth team and would always be by his side. Azure Dragon agreed immediately. However, there was a small incident in the middle, and that was when Tai Li shamelessly begged Yi Xian to let him follow Ling Long. Yi Xian thought about it and agreed. Mr. Yi, the leaders will definitely want to see you when you come to the capital this time. Without waiting for Azure Dragon to finish, Yi Xian waved his hand and interrupted, there's no need to see them for the time being. When I find out who wants to kill me, I'll meet the leaders. Alright, then I'll reply to the leaders. A bitter smile appeared on Azure Dragon's face. Only this Mr. Yi in front of him could be so casual. If it were anyone else, they would have already climbed up the social ladder. Everything was over. Azure Dragon ordered the members of the Earth team to lead Yi Xian and the others to their residence. The news of Yi Xian's arrival in the capital was also spread by Azure Dragon according to Yi Xian's instructions. The Nangong family of the capital's 8 great families. Yi Canghai and his son sat in the inner hall. Their expressions were extremely ugly, and their eyes were filled with hatred as they looked at the Nangong family head. Bang! Yi Canghai slammed the table and stood up. He roared angrily, Nangong Tian, are you trying to kill my Yi family? Brother Canghai, what are you talking about? Why don't I understand? Nangong Tian's hair was silver white, but he had a domineering aura. He picked up the teacup and took a sip, but his expression did not change at all. Nangong Tian, stop pretending. I was the one who told you the news of Yi Xian's arrival in the capital. I've really underestimated you. You actually have H-2 missiles. Even if you want the Nangong family to be destroyed, don't implicate the Yi family. Yi Canghai roared, but there was a trace of fear in his eyes. Even though the 8 great families in the capital city had an important position in the military, politics, and business, military, and politics, weapons had crossed the bottom line of Xia Nation. If the big shots of Xia country found out about this, they definitely wouldn't let it go. It was no wonder that Yi Canghai was so furious. His original intention was to ease the relationship between him and Yi Xian so that the Yi family could develop steadily. If Yi Xian could return to the Yi family, it would be the best thing. That was also the reason why he wanted Yi Ping to return to the Yi family. However, Yi Canghai was now very regretful. He initially thought that Nangong Tian would have the same thoughts as him after knowing that Yi Xian had the support of the big shots of Xia Nation. However, he did not expect Nangong Tian to go crazy and do such an irreversible thing because Nangong Yun died in Yi Xian's hands. What made Yi Canghai the most uneasy was that the Nangong family actually had H-2 missiles. Was Nangong Tian crazy? What was the Nangong family trying to do? Now, Yi Canghai did not want to guess why the Nangong family had such a thing. He was facing the pressure of the big shots of Xia Nation. This was because everyone knew that Yi Xian had an enormous grudge with the Yi family. With such a thing happening, the Yi family would be the first to bear the brunt of the suspicion. Wouldn't they become the scapegoat of the Nangong family? Brother Canghai, I don't understand what you're talking about. What H-2 missiles? Don't frame the Nangong family. Nangong Tian was as calm as a mountain and the corners of his lips curled into a smug smile. Humph. Looking at Nangong Tian's smug expression, Yi Canghai laughed out of anger and said, Fine, fine, fine. Since you want to drag the Yi family down with you, I might as well tell you that Yi Xian is not dead. He has already arrived in capital city. If he finds out that the Nangong family is behind this, he should know better than anyone what will happen to the Nangong family. Let's go. Yi Canghai called out to Yi Canghao and turned to walk out of the door. However, before Yi Canghai could walk out of the door, he suddenly stopped and turned to look at Nangong Tian. He sneered, "Nangong Tian, although the Yi family is in a precarious situation and the great Xia nation is about to collapse, you should know that the blood of the Yi family flows in Yi Xian's body. Even if he hates us, the Yi family is not at the stage where we will be wiped out. You're on your own now." Yi Canghai's words were powerful and powerful. The father and son then left the Nangong family. Crack! The exquisite teacup was crushed into pieces. Nangong Tian's expression was extremely gloomy. He never thought that Yi Xian would still be alive under the bombardment of the H-2 missile and even arrive at the capital. "Yi Canghai, you old man. Since you don't want to avenge Yun and only want to mend your relationship with that bastard, don't blame me for being ruthless and causing your Yi family to be doomed eternally," Nangong Tian said eerily. "Someone, go and reply to Mr. Enta. Tell him that I agree to his request." Nangong Tian's voice was crazy as he ordered. He also asked the servant to hurry out to convey Nangong Tian's message. At this moment, although Nangong Tian had gone crazy and started to ignore everything, he knew the severity of the situation. Facing Yi Xian, a Khanate stage martial artist, the Nangong family would be wiped out in an instant. "No, it seems like I really have to use the heaven summoning order. However, is that person really still alive in this world?" Nangong Tian mumbled to himself. He did not sound confident. However, at this point, the Nangong family would be exposed to Yi Xian sooner or later. If Yi Xian came, the Nangong family would not even have a chance to fight back. Nangong Tian understood that the first to strike would gain the upper hand. He stood up and walked towards the ancestral hall without hesitation. There was an ancient wooden token with the words Heaven Summoning Order engraved on it. When Nangong Tian held the token in his hand, his expression changed drastically. He felt a sharp pain in his palm and almost dropped the wooden token on the ground. Li Huantian, the 9th most powerful person in the world 100 years ago. Is he really still alive? Nangong Tian mumbled to himself with a strange look in his eyes. The Heaven Summoning Order had a long history. 100 years ago, Nangong Tian's grandfather had saved an extraordinary person who was severely injured. That person was the 9th most powerful person in the world, Li Huantian, who was a Khanate stage martial artist. After Li Huantian recovered, he gave the Heaven Summoning Order to Nangong Tian and even made a promise that if the Nangong family were to be wiped out within 100 years, as long as he was still alive, his descendants could come to Mount Langia to look for him. He would definitely help the Nangong family once. It doesn't matter if he's still alive or not. He's our last hope. Nangong Tian held the token tightly in his hand and said in a deep voice. A private jet soared into the sky. No one knew that Nangong Tian was holding the Heaven Summoning Order and was taking the private jet to Mount Langia to look for the legendary 9th most powerful person in the world, Li Huantian. Chapter 75. It was a spacious courtyard house with a history of 100 years. The ancient walls were engraved with the marks of time. The courtyard house was very large and gave people a retro feeling. There were a lot of potted plants in the courtyard and the air was filled with the fragrance of plants. Yi Xian sat upright in a pavilion. Beside him were Ling Long and Tai Li, who were on his left and right. "Mr. Yi, you told Master Azure Dragon not to investigate this matter. How can we find the culprit?" Ling Long asked carefully. "Have you heard of the saying, guilty conscience?" Yi Xian smiled. Looking at Yi Xian's smiling face, Ling Long seemed to understand something. She carefully probed, "What you mean is that the culprit knows you're in the capital. Even if you don't look for him, he'll be worried and won't just sit there and wait for death. He'll definitely expose his tracks." "That's right. Since this person wants me dead, he must hate me to the core. As long as I'm in the capital, he'll have to live in torment every day. This torment will make him unable to sleep at night. Naturally, he'll do some stupid things. Yi Xian chuckled. Brilliant, brilliant. Mr. Yi, your wisdom is as vast as the sea. Truly brilliant. Tai Li licked his face and flattered him. However, the words spoken by a boor like him instantly caused the atmosphere to become awkward. Yi Xian felt suffocated as he helplessly glanced at Tai Li, but didn't say anything. Big brother Tai, stop talking. Ling Long covered her forehead. Her face was a little red. She obviously felt a little embarrassed. This is the Extreme Yin Heart Sutra. It's a body training method that I created in the past 2 days. If you cultivate according to this method, it'll naturally solve the problem of your soul. Yi Xian took out a book and handed it to Ling Long. This made her happy and she kept thanking Yi Xian. Mr. Yi, you're not joking, right? Master Poison is a saint in the medical world. Even he couldn't cure Ling Long's illness. You just took out a secret book. How can this cure Ling Long? Tai Li didn't know how to keep his mouth shut. He just said whatever was on his mind. Big brother Tai, you. Ling Long was furious. Ling Long was furious and was about to scold Tai Li, but before she could finish speaking, Yi Xian waved his hand and interrupted her. Ling Long's soul is powerful. Even if she cultivates for dozens of years, her body won't be able to withstand her powerful soul, and this Extreme Yin Heart Sutra is compatible with her physique. 1 year of her cultivation is equivalent to 10 years of ordinary cultivation. When she steps into the Xiantian realm, the hidden dangers in her body will disappear without a trace. As Yi Xian spoke up to hear, his eyes were deep as he looked at Ling Long and continued, moreover, once you step into the Xiantian realm, you will be an invincible existence within the same realm. Mr. Huh, that's great. Unfortunately. Before Tai Li could finish his ecstatic words, Yi Xian's voice teased, as long as you're not afraid of becoming a woman, you can cultivate this technique. Tai Li's wild laughter came to an abrupt end. He suddenly felt a chill in his crotch. His entire body shivered. Then, he became silent, which also attracted Ling Long's laughter. Time passed very quickly. A week had passed since Yi Xian arrived in the capital. During this period of time, the capital could be said to be peaceful. Nothing major happened. Yi Xian was also very free. Every day, he would give Ling Long some pointers. The rest of the time, he would stroll around the capital and look at some historical sites. It was a rare moment of leisure. However, the Yi family did not have it easy during this period of time. The members of the Wu and Bureau were constantly monitoring the Yi family's movements. From Yi Canghai and his son to the servants, everything they saw and what they ate turned into a large amount of information on Azure Dragon's desk. Pressure from all sides engulfed the Yi family. The military, politics, and business all suffered losses. If not for the fact that the Yi family was one of the 8 great families and the other families understood the principle of being intimately interdependent, the Yi family would have already collapsed under this pressure. During this period of time, the Yi family sent an invitation to Yi Xian, hoping to ease their relationship with Yi Xian. However, the so-called invitation was directly thrown away by Yi Xian. He did not even look at it. There were still 3 days before the Wu and Bureau's annual meeting. At the same time, Nangong Tian finally arrived at Mount Lang. Mount Lang. There was a clear lake with clear blue water. Occasionally, a few koi fish would jump out of the water, causing ripples to appear in the lake. A man in a white robe stood beside the lake with his hands behind his back. His hair was black, but his temples were silver. When he opened and closed his eyes, it was as if he had seen through everything in the world. He gave off a sense of tranquility and indifference. This man looked like a young man, but the aura he released from time to time made him seem like an old man in his twilight years. When this kind of contradictory feeling gathered on this person, it didn't give off a strange feeling, as if it was natural for him to do so. Junior Nangong Tian greets Senior Huantian. Nangong Tian's voice trembled as he knelt on the ground. The dozens of ancient martial artists behind him also knelt on the ground with reverence on their faces. They kept kowtowing to the man in front of them. Whoosh! His palm and fingers moved like the wind, creating a strange sound in the void. Before Nangong Tian could react, the heaven summoning token in his hand flew out and shot towards the man in front of him. Li Huantian was in a daze as he held the wooden token in his hand. He closed his eyes slightly and exerted force with his palm and fingers. Instantly, the wooden token turned into wood powder and flew into the void. Who is Nangong Hua to you? Li Huantian's voice was hoarse, but it gave off a strong sense of oppression. Nangong Hua is my ancestor, and I'm the current master of the Nangong family. I didn't want to disturb your cultivation, but the Nangong family has encountered an unprecedented enemy, and we're about to be destroyed. I have no choice but to shamelessly ask you to come out. Nangong Tian touched the ground with his forehead and said in an extremely respectful voice. There's no end to the heavenly Tao, and there's no hope for immortality. I didn't expect to be involved in the trivial matters of the mortal world when I'm about to die. Li Huantian sighed, and the aura around him suddenly became extremely terrifying. His innate gang qi exploded in the void, and his murderous and desolate aura spread out at this moment. Fine, fine. The promise of the past has to be fulfilled. Let me, Li Huantian, see what kind of up-and-coming talents will appear in the Central Plains 100 years later. We welcome Senior Huantian to come out. Nangong Tian trembled continuously, causing the ancient martial artists behind him to kowtow again. Flying snow. Clang clang clang. Li Huantian shouted in a deep voice. A blue stone in the middle of the pool suddenly burst into pieces. A cold sword light crossed the sky and shot toward Li Huantian. With the flying snow sword in hand, Li Huantian's aura suddenly changed. He seemed to have turned into an unsheathed sharp sword that would cut down any living being that stood in his way. Chapter 76. In the outskirts of the capital, at the headquarters of the Wuxia department. In the spacious parking lot, there were all sorts of luxurious and low-key cars parked there. Familiar names constantly alighted from the cars. They were all famous tycoons from all walks of life. During the annual meeting of the Wuxia department, they were all fighting to watch this grand event. What kind of existence was the Wuxia department? There was no area that they couldn't control. Whether it was facing the strong enemies of other countries or cleaning up the hidden dangers of the country, the Wuxia department was an extremely powerful organization in the upper class of society. The world was bustling for profit, and the world was bustling for profit. Everyone had their own thoughts. If they could establish a relationship with the Wuxia department, it would be extremely beneficial for them. And to be able to attend the annual meeting of the Wuxia department was also an affirmation of their status. The 8 great families of the capital, the big shots of the military, the tycoons of the business world, the big shots of the political world. When these people greeted each other, everyone's faces revealed a smile. They even called out to their acquaintances and entered the Wuxia department headquarters together. A black car slowly drove into the parking lot. Tai Li was the first to open the car door and respectfully invited Yi Xian to get out. When Yi Xian appeared, the slightly noisy parking lot suddenly quieted down. All sorts of gazes were focused on Yi Xian. This person is Yi Xian. He's a guest of the Earth Group. It can't be. Such a young man is in such a high position. Shoo, lower your voice. I heard that this Mr. Yi killed many people from the Yi family. Even the big shots above seem to have an extremely complicated relationship with this person. Although their voices were very soft, they all fell into Yi Xian's ears. However, Yi Xian's expression was expressionless. How could he care about what these people thought? Mr. Yi, Lord Azure Dragon is waiting for you inside. Tai Li and Ling Long led the way in front, while Yi Xian slowly followed. Only when the three of them entered the headquarters of the Wusan department did these celebrities from all walks of life stop talking. At this moment, looking at Yi Xian's back, Yi Canghai and his son felt extremely complicated. In the midst of everyone's discussion, the father and son could be considered to have lost all face, but this also left them helpless. Humph, unfilial son. Yi Canghai snorted. Watch your mouth. No matter what, he's still your son. What kind of scandal is this if outsiders see it? Yi Canghai reprimanded. I understand, father. Yi Cang sighed deeply. The headquarters of the Martial Security Department was full of technology. Here, one could see the most advanced equipment, colorful scientific research instruments, researchers in white coats, and ancient martial arts ability users walking by from time to time. If someone who did not understand this place saw this scene, they might think that the Wuhan department was a research department and would not dare to believe that this place was a law enforcement department. Earth Group Martial Arts Practice Field. When Yi Xian stepped out of the elevator, he was greeted by a spacious venue. There were all sorts of weapons, ranging from ancient cold weapons to modern weapons. It was a feast for the eyes. The sound of fists and feet dancing could be heard. Every member of the Earth team was cultivating themselves. It could be said that it was extremely lively. Alright, everyone take a break. Come and meet our Earth Group guest. The Azure Dragon clapped his hands and told the members of the Earth team to stop cultivating. Under the lead of the Azure Dragon, they walked towards Yi Xian. Greetings, Mr. Yi. The arrival of Yi Xian caused the morale of the members of the Earth team to rise. Everyone's eyes were filled with reverence. Although they did not have much contact with Yi Xian, they had all heard of Yi Xian's deeds. Mr. Yi, what do you think of the cultivation of these team members? The Azure Dragon said proudly. Do you want me to tell the truth, or do you want me to tell the truth? Yi Xian chuckled. Of course it's the truth. I still believe in your vision. You can speak your mind. These stinking brats, it's time to give them a blow. The Azure Dragon quickly said. Looking at the expectant gazes of the members of the Earth team, Yi Xian thought for a while and slowly said, in my opinion, your cultivation is very average and your explosive power is insufficient. If you meet a true expert, I'm afraid you will suffer greatly. When Yi Xian finished speaking, the scene fell silent. Although the members of the Earth team did not refute him, their eyes were filled with unwillingness. One had to know that for them to be chosen to join the Martial Security Department, they all had a proud side in the field of ancient martial arts. However, Yi Xian had directly rejected them, which was undoubtedly a blow to their self-esteem. Humph. Suddenly, a cold snort was heard. A middle-aged man walked out from the crowd and looked at Yi Xian with a hint of hostility in his eyes. Guest Elder Yi, I think you are too arrogant. Our Earth team members have been through hundreds of battles, and we have carried out countless dangerous missions. They are the mainstays of the Earth team. Even if you are our guest elder, you cannot slander them like this. The middle-aged man said coldly. Instructor Chu is right. Although Mr. Ye's cultivation is strong and we can't compare to you, many villains have been captured by us. Many of our brothers have died in every mission. That's right. Although our cultivation is very weak in Mr. Ye's eyes, all of us are very hardworking and have never slacked off on our own cultivation. A middle-aged man took the lead and spoke out. Finally, a member of the Earth team began to refute Yi Xian. When the Azure Dragon saw this scene, his expression changed slightly, but he did not say anything. It was obvious that the Azure Dragon had seen how hard the members of the Earth team trained every day. Although he admired Yi Xian's cultivation, he did not believe Yi Xian's words on this matter. Alright, Instructor Chu, how can you talk to Mr. Yi like that? The Azure Dragon pretended to reprimand him. Group leader, I'm just talking about things. Chu Tianhe said proudly. Who was Yi Xian? He was an immortal cultivator, so his mind was very sensitive. How could he not see the current situation? Since the Azure Dragon and the others did not believe what he said, then there was no need for him to explain. But just as Yi Xian did not want to dwell on this matter, Chu Tianhe sneered again. It's rumored that guest elder Yi is a pre-celestial expert. I'm not talented, and my ancient martial arts cultivation is only at the Grandmaster realm. I've never seen a pre-celestial expert in my life, so I want to ask you for advice. Chu Tianhe's eager expression immediately caused the Azure Dragon's face to turn cold. He immediately reprimanded him, Instructor Chu, you are not a match for Mr. Yi. Why aren't you retreating? When did you become so unruly? Unfortunately, under the Azure Dragon's reprimand, Chu Tianhe only sneered as he looked at Yi Xian. His provocative expression was extremely obvious. Lord Azure Dragon, you've always said that Mr. Ye's cultivation is unfathomable. Since Mr. Yi is here today, why don't you show us your skills? Yeah, the other 7 team members are laughing at our Earth group. They said that Lord Azure Dragon found a young man to be a guest elder of the Earth group. They even said that Mr. Yi had connections with the higher-ups to sit in our Earth group's guest elder position. All sorts of comments appeared, and the members of the Earth group also started to jeer. This caused the Azure Dragon's face to darken, and he was about to reprimand them. Without waiting for the Azure Dragon to speak, Yi Xian looked at Chu Tianhe and said calmly, ever since I came here, you have been trying to target me. Although I don't know why, I can see the dissatisfaction in your eyes. That's right, I just can't accept you. What can you do? Chu Tianhe was very straightforward, and directly admitted to what Yi Xian said. He. Yi Xian laughed. He really laughed, but this kind of smile was slightly sinister, causing Chu Tianhe's heart to tighten. He looked at Yi Xian with a serious expression. I'm a very reasonable person. It's just that those who don't accept me are already dead. I wonder if you want to give it a try. Yi Xian said with a smile. Domineering and fierce, like a mountain pressing down on people. The words humble and low-key could not be reflected on Yi Xian at all. Chapter 77. When Yi Xian finished speaking, the members of the Earth team burst into an uproar. They all started to jeer as they looked eagerly at Chu Tianhe. In fact, the reason why Chu Tianhe deliberately targeted Yi Xian was because the position of a guest elder had been empty for 10 years. This was also his goal for many years, but it was taken away by Yi Xian halfway. How could he be willing to accept this? Chu Tianhe also understood that for Yi Xian to be able to become a guest elder of the Earth team, his strength was definitely not an embroidered pillow. However, he also firmly believed that as an ancient martial arts master, even if he could not defeat Yi Xian, as long as he could fight to a draw with the other party, it would make Yi Xian lose a lot of face. Chu Tianhe's thoughts were very clear. No matter what the result was, he had earned enough face. This also caused him to laugh coldly and say, anyone can speak empty words. I hope guest elder Yi won't cry too miserably later. Chu Tianhe strode into the training field and turned his head to look at Yi Xian with a sinister smile on his face. Mr. Yi Xian, please show mercy. The Azure Dragon said anxiously, afraid that Yi Xian would take Chu Tianhe's life. What a pity. Yi Xian didn't respond in the slightest. He had a smile on his face the entire time. When he took a step forward, he suddenly appeared in front of Chu Tianhe, causing his expression to change. He continuously retreated, maintaining a safe distance from Yi Xian. Chu Tianhe did not see clearly how Yi Xian appeared in the arena. It was not only him who did not see clearly, but also the members of the Azure Dragon and the Earth team. However, Chu Tianhe unconsciously swallowed his saliva. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead, and his back was already drenched in sweat. Regret had already risen in his heart. As the old saying goes, one can see the whole leopard from a single spot. Chu Tianhe deeply understood that with the other party appearing in front of him without him noticing, if he were to directly attack him, he would definitely not be able to react in time. Yi. Mr. Yi, good movement technique. Chu Tianhe forced a laugh, but if one listened carefully, they would notice that his voice was trembling. Instructor Chu, do your best. Instructor Chu, let Mr. Yi see the strength of our Earth group. On the stage, the two of them stood facing each other. Below the stage, the members of the Earth group cheered for Chu Tianhe, and all sorts of excited shouts could be heard. Come. Yi Xian crooked his finger, a smile on his face the entire time. But this provocative action caused Chu Tianhe's face to turn red, and his eyes filled with shame and anger. You're courting death. Bang! Chu Tianhe was finally enraged. He abruptly exerted force on his feet, causing the ground paved with fine steel to crack. His iron palms swung through the air as he charged violently toward Yi Xian like a ferocious tiger descending the mountain. It's the Great Monument Smashing Hand. It's actually the Great Monument Smashing Hand. This is the martial skill that Instructor Chu is famous for. A member of the Earth team shouted in shock, his eyes filled with excitement. This Mr. Yi Xian is definitely going to lose. Instructor Chu's Great Monument Breaking Hand can crack rocks and break gold. Even if they're both ancient martial arts masters, very few people would dare to take Instructor Chu's attack head-on. Someone else spoke with certainty, as if they had already seen the scene of Yi Xian's defeat. Bang! Suddenly, a muffled sound rang out. When the scene on the stage appeared in front of everyone's eyes, their originally excited expressions completely disappeared. Their faces even turned sluggish. How is this possible? What kind of joke is this? After a few breaths of time, the members of the Earth team exclaimed loudly. They could not believe what they were seeing. On the stage, Yi Xian did not move, the smile on his face was the same as ever, but his sparkling and translucent jade-like palm was currently grabbing onto Chu Tianhe's neck, and was even lifting him into the air. Cluck, cluck, cluck. Chu Tianhe's face was purple, and crisp sounds kept coming from his throat. His four limbs were randomly kicking in the air, as if he was a weak chicken waiting to be slaughtered. TSK, TSK, TSK. Yi Xian slowly shook his head, a cold light flashing across his eyes. His voice was still calm as he said, "Too weak, you're really too weak. Let me go. I admit defeat," Chu Tianhe said with difficulty. He could completely feel how terrifying the power contained in the palm that was grabbing onto his neck was. If it was a moment later, he would definitely be strangled to death by the other party. His heart and guts were torn apart, and the invasion of life and death was what Chu Tianhe was feeling right now. Didn't I say that I'm a very reasonable person? Since you don't want to accept me, then you can only become a dead man. Yi Xian seemed to be talking about a very normal matter, but when it entered the ears of the crowd, it made their hair stand on end, as if they had fallen into the abyss of hell. Mr. Yi, please show mercy. The Azure Dragon's face was pale as he spoke out anxiously. Bang! Yi Xian moved his palm, and with a slap, he sent Chu Tianhe flying, and even caused the sound of bones breaking to ring out. A large amount of blood spurted out from Chu Tianhe's mouth, and his entire body spun 365 degrees in the air, and suddenly smashed into the stage. Puff! Blood stained the stage, mixed with a few teeth. Chu Tianhe's body was constantly twitching, and the members of the Earth group who were watching this scene had already become deathly silent, as if their souls had left their bodies. Dong, dong, dong. Like raging waves crashing against the shore, like rocks piercing through the air, Yi Xian slowly walked forward until he arrived in front of Chu Tianhe. His wide feet suddenly stepped on Chu Tianhe's face, and he continued to crush it back and forth. I'm a very reasonable person. I'll give you a chance now. As long as you say the word submit, I'll spare your life today. Yi Xian said calmly. At this moment, Chu Tianhe was so ashamed and furious that he was seriously injured. When he heard Yi Xian's words, his heart was about to explode from anger. He was the instructor of the Earth Group, yet he had lost so much face today. However, Chu Tianhe knew very well that if he really said the word submit, he would lose a lot of prestige in front of the members of the Earth Group. No. Impossible. Chu Tianhe roared weakly, pretending to be a tough guy. Ah! As soon as Chu Tianhe finished speaking, he let out an extremely miserable cry of pain. Half of his head was suddenly stomped into the ground by Yi Xian, and a large amount of blood flowed out from his head. If Chu Tianhe was not an ancient martial arts grandmaster and had a strong physical body, Yi Xian's kick would have taken his life. In the face of so-called dignity in life, it seems that you have chosen dignity. Is it not good to live? Yi Xian made a strange sound and raised his foot again. His voice became extremely sinister as he continued, since you want to pretend to be a hero, I'll fulfill your wish. Chu Tianhe was truly afraid. He could feel that Yi Xian was not joking. He was afraid that he would really take his life in the next moment. Whine. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. When his foot landed, an explosive sound came from the air, causing the members of the Earth Group to cry out in alarm. It also caused the Azure Dragon's face to turn pale as he pleaded, Mr. Yi, please spare his life. I submit. At this critical moment, Chu Tianhe finally cowered. His voice trembled as he begged for mercy. Large amounts of tears flowed out of his eyes. It was obvious that he was extremely humiliated. Chapter 78. A living ancient martial arts grandmaster directly cried out. When this scene fell into the eyes of the crowd, everyone's faces revealed complicated expressions. Yi Xian bullied people. He bullied people very much. It could be said that he bullied people to the extreme, and this was also the result he wanted. Yi Xian had always believed in one sentence. If a dog bites a person, the person will naturally not bite back. However, Yi Xian's method was to break the other party's dog leg and let the other party remember it for the rest of his life. The cold killing intent disappeared. Yi Xian bent down to help Chu Tianhe up and even helped him tidy up his wrinkled clothes. He smiled and said, Instructor Chu, I'm really sorry. Actually, I was just joking. Please don't blame me. Looking at Yi Xian's smiling face, Chu Tianhe's entire body tensed up. Even his teeth were unconsciously chattering. He looked at Yi Xian as if he was looking at a demon. His heart was filled with great fear. No. It's fine. Chu Tianhe forced a laugh, but his smile was even uglier than crying. No, wrong. Chu Tianhe was already crying. However, he really did not want to meet Yi Xian again because he was really afraid of Yi Xian. The person in front of him was temperamental and was simply a devil. Men, take Instructor Chu down to treat his injuries. Azure Dragon sighed and also had a member of the Earth team help Chu Tianhe to the infirmary. Yi Xian slowly walked down the stage, but the members of the Earth team unconsciously retreated. They looked at Yi Xian with a look of reverence that they had never seen before. Obviously, Yi Xian's methods had allowed them to truly experience what it meant to be a fiend. Looking at everyone's fearful expressions, Yi Xian's heart did not waver in the slightest. In fact, there was a huge reason why he did this. Establishing his might, that's right, establishing his might. Today, Chu Tianhe alone had dared to target him. If Yi Xian didn't strike like lightning and teach him a lesson, it was hard to guarantee that there would be others who would imitate Chu Tianhe and cause trouble for him in the future. Although Yi Xian wasn't afraid of people finding trouble with him, this kind of trivial matter would annoy him to no end. And the effect in front of him was very obvious. Yi Xian had already established a fierce character in front of the members of the Earth group. "Mr. Yi, I really admire you," Azure Dragon said with a bitter smile. "My methods were a little extreme, but it saved me a lot of trouble." "Don't blame me," Yi Xian said calmly. "Azure Dragon wouldn't dare to blame you, sir. It was Chu Tianhe who didn't know his place. He brought this upon himself," Azure Dragon said. The two of them chatted for a while before taking a seat and starting to talk about the Martial Security Bureau's annual meeting. Time passed very quickly. An hour later, Yi Xian also found out about the situation of the Earth group from the Azure Dragon. This also made the Azure Dragon look embarrassed, and he was a little embarrassed to face Yi Xian. "When the time comes, I will need Mr. Yi to make a move. Just don't hurt the other groups of guests." The Azure Dragon carefully probed. "It's fine, it's just a small matter," Yi Xian said calmly. While the two of them were talking, the surrounding members of the Earth group started to cultivate again. However, from time to time, they would peek at Yi Xian from the corner of their eyes filled with complicated emotions. In the ancient martial arts world, they believed that the strong were respected. Today, Yi Xian had made a move with lightning speed, allowing them to see what a true expert was. This also caused some people to have some thoughts in their hearts. Zhang Xiaochang was an ordinary member of the Earth group. His ancient martial arts cultivation was only at the early stage of the concealing strength. Although he trained hard every day, he was an extremely weak existence in the Earth group. He even had a shameful nickname, Zhang Xiaoruo. Zhang Xiaochang's heart was currently in a dilemma. When he saw Yi Xian defeat Chu Tianhe in an instant, he was extremely afraid of Yi Xian. However, Zhang Xiaochang's heart was restless, because he had heard Yi Xian mention that their cultivation was average, and their explosive power was insufficient. This was also his greatest weakness in ancient martial arts cultivation. After hesitating for a long time, Zhang Xiaochang seemed to have a voice in his heart telling him that if he did not ask Yi Xian for guidance now, he would not know when he would be able to see this guest Yi again. If he did not seize this opportunity, he would probably regret it for the rest of his life. Zhang Xiaochang quickly made a decision, his face flushed red, but under the astonished gazes of the members of the Earth group, he walked towards Yi Xian with extreme determination. "Yi. Mr. Yi. You just said that we don't have enough explosive power. Can you give this junior some pointers?" Zhang Xiaochang's face flushed red, he did not dare to look into Yi Xian's eyes, his voice trembling slightly, he was obviously extremely nervous. "Nonsense, I'm talking about business with Mr. Yi, you." Without waiting for the Azure Dragon to finish speaking, Yi Xian waved his hand and interrupted him, causing the Azure Dragon to be startled and swallow the words of reprimand in his mouth. "You're not ashamed to ask. This is the potential that an expert should have. You're not bad." Yi Xian smiled and nodded, then stood up from his seat and walked towards an iron pillar. This also caused Zhang Xiaochang to suddenly raise his head, a look of gratitude appearing in his eyes, and he quickly followed behind Yi Xian. Such a scene naturally caused the members of the Earth group to scramble to watch, and there were even whispers of discussion. "I didn't see it, but Zhang Xiaoruo is so bold, he actually dares to disturb Yi Xian. What do you know? Xiaoruo has always been very hard-working in his cultivation, but he hasn't made any progress. He's also taking a risk. If you ask me, Xiaoruo is doing something unnecessary. The path of cultivation is a step-by-step process. Even if this Mr. Ye's cultivation is terrifying, how much can he improve in terms of martial arts?" All sorts of discussions rang out. At this moment, Zhang Xiaochang's face was flushed red, so he naturally heard it. However, the determination in his eyes did not change in the slightest. An iron pillar was made of fine iron, so its hardness was naturally extraordinary. "Use your greatest strength to strike this iron pillar." Yi Xian turned around and looked at Zhang Xiaochang. "Yes, Mr. Yi." Zhang Xiaochang focused his mind and calmed his qi, ignoring the discussions of the people around him. After a dozen breaths, he felt that he was already at his peak state, and directly clenched his fist and punched the iron pillar. Bang! With a muffled sound, the iron pillar swayed slightly and emitted a buzzing sound. Not even a trace of a fist mark was left behind, causing Zhang Xiaochang to lower his head in shame. The foot is the root of the earth, the body must be as immovable as a mountain, the spine must be like a dragon, and the blood energy must be like the ocean. With the belt as the hip, with the hip as the arm, with the arm as the fist, condensing the blood energy in the entire body into one point. It was as if the morning bell and evening drum were ringing, as if the light of dawn was attacking. When Yi Xian's voice sounded out, Zhang Xiaochang's face froze, and a confused look appeared in his eyes, as if he had fallen into deep thought. After a full 10 minutes, Zhang Xiaochang's body did not move, and the surrounding members of the Earth group had looks of contempt in their eyes, as if they were about to disperse. Ha! Suddenly, Zhang Xiaochang opened his eyes, and a ray of light flashed across his eyes. With an explosive sound from his mouth, he once again turned his palm into a fist, and the fist light was like a resplendent meteor, violently smashing towards the iron pillar in front of him. Dong! When the fist and iron collided, there was no strange sound. Just as everyone helplessly shook their heads and was about to disperse, an extremely soft and crisp sound came from the iron pillar, causing the surrounding members of the Earth group to widen their eyes as they looked at the scene in front of them in disbelief. The iron pillar made of fine iron was cracking like a spider web, and a large number of iron pieces continued to fall to the ground. Until a loud bang rang out, and the iron pillar suddenly exploded into pieces. The dazzling iron stars scattered on the ground, as if they were about to pierce one's eyes to the point that one could not open one's eyes. Silence, silence, a deathly silence. The entire Earth Group martial arts practice field was completely silent. After a full 10 breaths of time, the dumbstruck members of the Earth Group all burst into an uproar. They even rushed over to Zhang Xiaochang's side and continuously touched his body, as if they were looking at a rare treasure. Xiao Ruo. No. Xiaochang. Did you really do this? A member of the Earth Group asked in shock. This. How is this possible? Xiaochang is only at the dark stage, how could he break the iron pillar? All sorts of clamorous discussions could be heard, and Zhang Xiaochang also stared blankly at the scattered pieces of iron on the ground. He kept stroking his palm, as if he had fallen into a daze. Yi. Mr. Yi. Thank you. Zhang Xiaochang finally woke up from his daze, and tears of joy flowed out of his eyes. He directly knelt in front of Yi Xian, and continuously kowtowed to thank him. This also caused them to look at Yi Xian with an extremely warm expression. There were even some who were ready to move, wanting to go up and ask Yi Xian to give them some pointers. Unfortunately, before the members of the Earth Group could arrive in front of Yi Xian, the Azure Dragon strode over and waved them away. Then, he looked at the iron pieces on the ground in shock, and bowed to Yi Xian. Mr. Yi, previously, the Azure Dragon was ignorant, now I apologize to you. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.